house before apparently taking his own life. We still don't know. The AP's Tim McGuire.
On the campus of St. Francis Health System in Tulsa, Oklahoma, a man armed with a handgun and a rifle opened fire on people on the second floor of a building housing outpatient surgery and a women's breast health center. Deputy Police Chief Eric Daglish says police encountered the shooter just minutes after getting the call. I don't know how long the call took to come in, but it appears as though the whole thing was a four-minute or so time span. At least 4 victims in the shooter are dead. Tim McGuire.
Nicholas O'Brien rushed to the scene to check on his mother, who was in a nearby building.
She was okay. The shooter had been shot was down a lot better. It's horrible what happened.
Mourners gathered yesterday to Catholic Church in Texas to say goodbye to Robb Elementary School teacher Irma Garcia and her husband Joe. Irma died in the shooting at the Uvalde, Texas grade school. Joe died 2 days later from a heart attack after visiting his wife's memorial. Today, the House Judiciary Committee holds a hearing on a bill. It would raise the age limit for buying a semi-automatic center-fire rifle from 18 to 21. Democrats call it the Kentucky Kids Act. A vote by the full House could come as early as next week. Russia's economy is collapsing, says Germany's vice chancellor, because of Western sanctions. He says time is working against Russia as it presses on with its war in Ukraine. 4 days of celebrations honoring Queen Elizabeth II, 70 years on the throne, are underway in Britain. This is AP News. They've had the first day of testimony in the Bill Cosby sex assault case in California. The AP's Oscar Wells Gabriel has this.
I want to go. I want to leave. Those are the words of witness said that 16-year-old Judy Hunt told her minutes after a forced sexual encounter with Bill Cosby at the Playboy Mansion in the mid-1970s. Donna Samuelson, Hunt said that at the time was the first witness in the case in which Hunt was suing Cosby for assault. Samuelson, who was just 17, said she wanted to spend the rest of the day at the same celebrity swim pen and was upset that her year younger friend wanted to leave. So she told her Cosby had tried to have sex with her. That was shot some photos of Cosby and Hunt together that day. Images shown constantly to the jury on day one of the trial. On Oscar Wells Gabriel.
The number of people who are quitting their jobs is at a new record high, 4.4 million in April. I'm Rita Foley, AP News.
This is 8:20 a.m. WCPG Willow Springs and streaming worldwide at WCPG820.com. We are Chicago's progressive talk, where facts matter. Now your WCPG 820 Chicago traffic update.
In southern Kenosha County, Wisconsin, and northern Clay County, Illinois, there's a major closure now on Sheridan Road in both directions. Russell Road to 165. Sheridan is blocked for long-term construction scheduled in September. And in Kenosha, 104th Street is shut down at Sheridan as well. So I gave Pastor Brooks a call, but he didn't pick up.
Oh, just keep on. Yep. Just keep trying.
Contract, a little sluggish. The long road to 83, then all of the Cosby. The inbound Stevenson trip time is 31 minutes from the Veterans Memorial to Selma Lakeshore Drive. Inbound line gets a little heavy on 35th Street, 16 minutes, 90 minutes to downtown. That's traffic. I'm Jim Alamonte.
Light at the end of the tunnel.
Right at the end of the tunnel.
That light at the end of the tunnel. Guiding light.
That light is going to get brighter and brighter.
Another day.
I think it's a great day.
At Joan Esposito Show. Live, local, and progressive. Weekday afternoons at 2. WCPT 820.
And summertime gets underway. What do the kids have planned? How about a fun summer activity?
All right, I called them again, and this time it just went straight to the dial tone. So,
Okay, no, just keep trying them.
yeah, I'll keep trying them.
And Jennifer Bishop is going to call in because she's having trouble getting through.
Bored and math in summer.
Yeah, I know. Each time I try calling her, it always goes to voicemail.
Yeah,
So,
she said there's something, hold on, there's something wrong with the phones
We're changing lives.
because she said it doesn't ring with her. Anyway, she's gonna call in on the hold on, she's gonna call in on the regular line, okay?
yeah, that's like. Can you text me your number though? Because I don't know what what her number is.
I'll-
so, like,
I'll-
when I
No, it's okay, honey. I'm just trying to cut down on what we're talking about because I'm like under the gun here. Okay.
Yeah, 15 seconds.
All right, honey. There you go.
176. Chicago and roofers and waterproofers, local 11. Learn more at WCPTA20.com.
Because facts matter. You're listening to WCPT 820.
Hey, everybody. Welcome. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show. It's a joy to be with you today. I'm getting feedback. We're going to work that out. All right, everybody. It's Thursday, June 2nd, 2022. I'm Santita Jackson coming to you from WCPT, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station based right here in Chicago, and AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. I want to hear your voices today as we talk about responsibility. As we've been looking at Uvalde and Buffalo and all of these mass shootings. I got an infographic from Al Jazeera that says that, because it's kind of difficult to measure what these mass shootings are. We've had between 3 and 268 mass shootings, if not more, not including Tulsa yesterday. And in the United States, we've had more mass shootings in the United States than we've had days in the year. We have more guns in the United States than we have people in the country. And we've seen the gun industry get left out of this discussion. The gun sellers have been left out of this discussion. We've talked about mental illness, people, personal responsibility, but no institutional accountability. No. They just continue to make their money. The NRA used to protect the rights of people who were hunters. Now they're protecting the rights of the corporatocracy. Isn't that interesting? All of these big organizations that used to work for people now work for the corporations. It's something to think about. And so they've shifted their PR, if you will. They've shifted even how they sell to guns, sell to people who want to buy guns. They used to sell guns so that you could go hunting. Now they sell guns so that you can defend yourself. So we're going to talk about that today because Sandy Hook families won a landmark lawsuit. Because you can't sue these gun manufacturers, but they found a loophole. And guess what? We're going to talk about that today. Because they won $73 million from the rifle maker of the rifle that was used to kill all of those people, those children and people at Sandy Hook. So we're going to talk about that today. Should they be sued? Should gun manufacturers and gun sellers be sued? Call me at 773-763-9278, 773-763-9278. I want to know what your thoughts are on this matter, really, because while we're doing all of this talking, all of this, we're trying to, find out where did we go wrong. We're avoiding the cultural discussion, just how violent we are verbally, with or without guns. We can be very, very unkind to each other. We are. That's part of the problem. The killing begins with the unkindness. Be very clear on that, with the bad thought about someone, feeling that you should take someone's life from them. That's where it starts. So I want to know what your thinking is today about this. Call me at 773-763-9278, 773-763-9278. And I want you to meet Ashley and my Morning Stars and everybody over on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. Please meet Andre and Samantha. They're there too. And Linda. Mark, if you can, get on over there. But if you're not, meet Mark and Mark Hay and Mark Stevens. Mark Stevens is out in D.C., one of my other homes. That's right. I'm Howard-eyed, everybody. Well, meet them at the Santita Jackson and Friends page. Hey, Michael Ann, one of the original Morning Stars. Everybody, I hope that you will come to the Rainbow Push Convention. The Rainbow Push Convention, it is free, June 18th through the 22nd. And on the 17th, Mrs. Jackson is going to have an event at the South Shore Cultural Center. Come on, everybody. It's the summer, just about. And let's go on and enjoy it. But of course, we're going to do these things safely. Please wear your masks. Everybody take care of yourselves. Let's get right to it. As we talk about who should bear responsibility for all of these shootings. Yes, everybody. In Chicago, we're going to have a high of 70 degrees, mostly sunny. It'll be mostly sunny in Minneapolis, St. Paul as well. 75 degrees. Ah, the NBA Finals, the championships begin tonight. It's the American Championships. Have you seen the African League? Yeah, they're expanding. The NBA is about to be the International BA, I guess. That's right. Anyway, the Celtics and the Warriors play tonight. Yes, I will be watching that game. NHL, the Rangers, well, they will triumph over the Lightning 6-2, and the Oilers will be playing the Avalanche tonight. Who's going to win the Stanley Cup this year? We will soon see. In the Major League Baseball, the Blue Jays, well, they won over our White Sox 7-3. The Cubs 4-3 over the Brewers, and the Tigers Twins yesterday 5-0. And the Dow closed down 176 points. The Nasdaq closed down 86 points. The S&P 500 closed down 30 points. At least 5 people were killed in a Tulsa mass shooting yesterday. 5 people were confirmed to be killed by the police, including the shooter. The Tulsa World reports that the shooting occurred yesterday afternoon in a building just south of St. Francis Hospital. A Tulsa police captain, Richard Muhlenberg, described a catastrophic scene, as he characterized it, at the Natalie Building in Tulsa, Oklahoma. They said that the shooter, who used a rifle and a handgun during his rampage, died of a self-inflicted gunshot wound. In fact, more than half of the gun deaths in the United States are suicide, everybody. That's something we need to talk about also. And the police also said they connected a bomb threat at a home in Oklahoma to the shooter. Who is the shooter? Don't you think we need to know who these people are? I really do. I want to know who they are, everybody. At least 4 people killed. These people come from somewhere. 5 people, including the shooter. This comes as the U.S. grapples with a series of mass shootings that have left communities from coast to coast grieving. Less than 3 weeks ago, 10 people were killed in a racist attack upon Black people at the Top supermarket in Buffalo, New York. And then last week, an 18-year-old, Salvador Ramos, first was Peyton Gendron in Buffalo, New York, then Salvador Ramos, 18 years of age, just after his 18th birthday, went and purchased these guns and opened fire and killed 19 children and 2 teachers, everybody, before police killed him. If we're to believe that story, because they cannot get those stories straight, everybody. President Biden said yesterday there is little he can do to lower the cost of gasoline or food at the moment. He said, quote, "There's a lot going on right now, but the idea we're going to be able to click a switch, bring down the cost of gasoline is not likely in the near term, nor is it in regard to food." Something needs to happen, though, because there is a Bloomberg report that shows that corporations are having their best, they're making more money than they have since 1990 in more than 32 years. And many people feel that, the data is clear. They have made more money in our bad times than anybody. How can they make more profits? And because we keep paying, and you hear the corporate media gleefully say, well, people are paying, so no, it's not okay. It's not okay. And money does run out. In the meantime, it does appear that things are amping up in Ukraine. The Biden administration is planning to sell Ukraine armed attack drones as the embattled country, according to this Common Dreams report, continues to defend itself from Russia's nearly 100-day invasion. Supplying large, long-range drones would be a significant escalation in the types of systems supplied to Ukraine. Reuters reports that the administration plans to sell these drones right away. They can fly 30 hours or more, and they collect massive amounts of intelligence. This is a proxy war, everybody? It appears so. Indeed, Medea Benjamin, the renowned peace advocate, has said the slippery slope just got a lot steeper. The slippery slope leading to a direct U.S. confrontation with Russia, she said, just got a lot steeper. What do you think about that, everybody? She went on. The U.S. and U.K. governments showed no efforts or desire to achieve a peaceful settlement of the armed conflict between Russia and Ukraine. Indeed, Senator Joe Manchin was at the World Economic Forum, in which he took peace off the table. In the meantime, 48 lawmakers in the United States, 4 dozen U.S. House lawmakers on Wednesday introduced a war powers resolution to end, quote, unauthorized, close quote, U.S. military involvement in a Saudi-led coalition a war on Yemen. We're there too, everybody. Quote, according to these congressmen, we should not be involved, quote, in yet another conflict in the Middle East, especially a brutal war that has created the world's largest humanitarian crisis, close quote. As bad as things are in Ukraine, they're even worse in Yemen, everybody. This bipartisan House effort is led by Representatives Peter DeFazio, a Democrat from Oregon, Pramila Jayapal, Democrat from Washington, Nancy Mace, a Republican from South Carolina, and Adam Schiff, a Democrat from from California. Everybody, Senator Bernie Sanders will introduce a companion version when the Senate reconvenes, according to the Congressional Progressive Caucus. We are in Yemen. And everyone, I think you better watch out. Look out for what's happening with the Republicans. Progressives are calling upon Democrats to have greater outreach during the midterms and moving forward. Why is that? Because the GOP, have you noticed this? They're investing in community centers in the Black and Latino communities. Community centers, that is in poor areas. They are recruiting everybody. Remember, President Trump's numbers went up in the Black and Latino community in 2020. Think about that, everybody. He got a nice little chunk in 2016, but he got more votes from Black women and Black men, from Latinas and Latino men and women. Okay, so think about that, everybody. The Republicans are on the move. What are we doing? Ah, it's just so much, but I'm looking for some good news. Cosme, do we have Pastor? Oh, okay, I'm looking. That's what I'm looking for, the Grammy Award winner, who I just found out is a general contractor as well. So you know what, HGTV, watch out, because Pastor Darius Brooks is on the move, renovating homes and whatnot. I love it, love it, love it. But you know what he's also doing with Grace Central Church in Westchester, Illinois? He's feeding people. And one of the things that struck me, Pastor Brooks, as you get together, give us this good news today. One of the things that struck me was that you said people in Mercedes Benzes and on and on and on and on, and luxury cars are coming to you for food. When can people come and get something to eat at Grace Central Church in Westchester, Illinois?
Good morning, Grace Central Church, every Tuesday from 5 to 7, and we feed between 200 and 600 families every Tuesday. And then on Wednesdays, we create something for the seniors, Santita, that the seniors doesn't have to come out in the evening. And we do this every week. There's a passion in our hearts. So we meet Grace Central Church, 10216 South Kitchener Street, Westchester, Illinois, every Tuesday from 5 to 7, and every Wednesday from noon till 2. You can come and get food. We are here to serve, and we're going to be the message today, growing to do greater. Growing to be greater. This 1 Corinthians 3 and 6, I planted the seed, Apollos water it, but I grow it, or I give the increase. And Santita, that's what I want to talk about, growing to do greater, growing to do greater. And I'm excited about being with you every Thursday. But I also like that when I'm with you, it's the thoughts are thoughtful, insightful, and impactful, and that the message are not always about just good stuff, but knowing how we have to include God's plans in everything that we do. Everything that we do, that we include His plans, Santita, and the greater that we say we want. So it won't just be what we think it should be. It could be so much better and greater, and God will give you an endurance and maintenance in the things that He gives when we tell Him the desires of our hearts. We have to be careful what we ask God for. God is not a God who could be explained. He can only be experienced. And we have to be honest with ourselves. And the simply to being honest with ourselves is not good, bad, right, wrong. Being honest with ourselves is a true, honest place that whatever's not clear, it can be a transformation for us to do better. Because God calls us to be servants. He calls us to be able to be available to Him in everything we do. But Santita, at the same token, He doesn't want us to be wore out with us doing what we're doing, because that's the wisdom of the Word of God. The enemy doesn't want not even the greater is allowing God to make sure his details are in everything that we do. The enemy of this world doesn't want us to be with him. He wants to isolate us. And everything we do, if we're not careful, he'll make us feel like we're not doing anything. But Santita, Eve, looked at some good, greater stuff. See, God said if Adam would wake up, that God was trying to hide something from him and Apple. But she was chasing something that was greater or was not greater for her. You have to put God in your details of wanting to do greater. We cannot be greater if we are not making healthy decisions and choices. And I got to close with this because I'm getting excited. God's greater is the true source of satisfaction. Whenever you say greater or you want to do greater or you want to do better, you want to ask God, what is his language on this doing better? And when you do this, Santita, God is so amazing. He comes with a good part. Once we as individuals use God's word to do greater, he puts us with the right kind of people to do it, with the right kind of situation, with the right situation. Because we got to win when God is in it. We got to win when God is in it. He puts an exclamation at his word. His word is the only true answer to our every desire. I give what I call actions on Tuesdays. They are the things we ought to do for that message. And one is when you please God, it doesn't matter who you displease. But if you displease God, it doesn't matter who you please. There is a way we can do greater. And when we put God's details in it, I'm going to close with this because this thing has blessed my life all week. In my plans, I have to make sure I include God's change of plan in my plans. In my plans, I have to make sure I include God's change of plans in our plans because he's not going to take our choice away. I want to do this. I want to do this. Okay. God says, what about me? Well, God, okay, you could do that, but do it this way. Don't do it that way. Oh, okay, got you, God. Got you. That's my prayer today, to do greater. Make sure in your plans you include some of God's change of plans.
Yes.
In your plans, the plans that you have to be amazing executed.
Amen. Amen, everybody. Be open to the reset. I love it. I love it. Pastor Darius Brooks, the Grace Central Church in Westchester, Illinois. Get there. You can worship virtually and in person on Sunday. What time? Very quickly, because I got to move on to Dr. Knighton. Pastor Brooks, what time could we see you on Sunday?
Till noon, and on Tuesday from 7 till 8, Darius Brooks, Grace Central Church. Google us, you'll find it.
Amen to that. Amen to that. And of course, he and the Tommies will be at the Rainbow Push Convention. The Tommies, they're having a great anniversary season on June 18th. They will be, they're going to be all over the convention. So we cannot wait to have them there. Yes, the world famous Tommies, his Tommies, him and Percy Beatty. Love it. I love you, Pastor Brooks. Let me go to Dr. Shanina Knighton, who we've got to get out to your church, Dr. Brooks, Pastor Brooks, because, now people are beginning to talk about infection and preventing infection. And, you want to do that. But I think people are talking about that because now we've been in the pandemic for 2.5 years, almost 3. It's hard to believe, but it has been a long time. But we're still in it. And people are talking about long COVID now, Dr. Knighton. Dr. Knighton, I've got about 4.5 minutes here, and they belong to you. What is long COVID? Why don't the vaccines prevent them, mitigate? I mean, what is long COVID? And is there anything you can do about it?
Yes, good morning. So long COVID is essentially having symptoms associated with COVID after having COVID for a long duration outside of that time frame. So typically if, let's say, infectious disease or symptoms from an infectious disease last, let's say, 7 to 21 days or 28 days, and essentially lasts longer than that. So someone might have initially had a loss of taste or smell when they had symptoms associated with COVID, but then that ended up extending out, let's say, 6 months, even though all of their other symptoms may have resolved and they may have recovered or then even tested negative. So it's a wide range in terms of how long that is, but it's any symptoms that last more than 4 weeks or afterwards, which is typically that 28 days that I had mentioned. There's been talks of people having ringing in their ears, heart palpitations, issues with, and it's different from complications. Complications, if you had COVID and maybe now, let's say, it impacted your kidneys or it impacted your lungs, and you're having to live with that. That's different from, let's say, a long hauler or long COVID, where they have, like, let's say, brain fog. They might be getting fatigue still. They might have a shortness of breath. They might have headaches. So something that's not necessarily a chronic condition that requires, like, let's say, long-term form of treatment, but more so just something that is impacting them that even too can sometimes be impacting their quality of life.
Well, let me ask you this. If you have long COVID, are you still infectious? Or is this, because I remember hearing early on, I only have about a minute and a half left, that it was that COVID-19 was actually a disease. Is that what we're looking at?
Well, COVID-19 it's always been a disease. It's an infection. And speaking, like, let's talk about the origin of it. So that's SARS-CoV-2, okay? So SARS-CoV-2, which is responsible for COVID-19, is a respiratory infectious disease. So we are looking at an actual infectious disease.
So are you still infectious when you are a long hauler? I mean, is it like still having COVID?
No.
Okay. Okay.
You may have the symptoms of COVID, but you still very well may test negative. So it does not mean that you're going to test. There have been some people that have extended issue of testing positive, but that has nothing to do with being a long hauler of COVID.
Is there anything that people can do? I just heard an interview with an epidemiologist, interestingly enough, yesterday, and she was saying, if you can hear my voice, I'm very hoarse. She said, I'm still struggling with a lot of issues. Are there other treatments that you can, to treat the different issues because COVID treats different people, everybody differently. Is there anything that people can do to get help for the different symptoms that present themselves in long haul COVID?
As of not right now, sometimes you can end up having more issues trying to treat the problem opposed to just monitoring and waiting on them to resolve. So you may get something, let's say, to alleviate the headache, or even like, let's say, maybe a Tylenol or something for a headache may not necessarily work all the time when we're talking about chronic conditions. And we know that there's only so much, let's say, of a Tylenol or, a drug that you can put in your body to alleviate headache. And so if we're talking about something that's lasting for months, that's essentially you having to think about ways to treat it. So naturally, there might be ways, let's say, lowering light. You may want to try some naturopathic things to help with that. But a lot of the stuff that people experience afterwards may not necessarily just resolve on it. Or it'll resolve on its own. It just has to take time. And unfortunately, it alters a lot of people's quality of life, and that is the issue. Think about, like, with the shortness of breath, if you're a kid, an athlete, a young adult, somebody, a mid-age adult that's used to being able to breathe all the time, but then now you feel like you can barely get up and you're short of breath, that would impact your quality of life, because if you were an athlete and worked out every day, that's going to change that trajectory, because even though your mind is telling you can do it, your body may not necessarily be able or safe to do it at that time as you're experiencing those long-term symptoms.
Dr. Shanina Knighton, everybody. Dr. Shanina Knighton, please, please, please go to @HeyDrNina, @HeyDrNina. She has a lot of wonderful tips in her social media, so you can prevent infection. I'm going to get her back tomorrow because we're at the beginning of the summer. I want to talk to her about how we should behave at picnics and as we go out. Everybody's acting like the pandemic is still not here. It's not here. It's here. Let's talk about what about the gun manufacturers and the gun sellers? Should they bear responsibility? Back in just a minute.
Hey, Dr. Knight, is your phone plugged into like an outlet or a charger? Are you like on Bluetooth?
I'm not.
Okay,
Yeah.
because we're getting a lot of phone static from your end.
Yeah. Because it seems like something is happening.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if I didn't do anything this morning, anything well with everything. But I'm sure he probably needed to hang up and call back. Sometimes I guess to mention that, but
Yeah.
I'm not doing anything different.
No. We have a really bad connection with you this morning. It was clicking straight through, and people were having a hard time hearing you. And I said, okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Because that's what we're hearing now. If I could get a little bit more time with you tomorrow, because I want to go, you've had some really interesting infographics about the things that people need to do now that the summertime is upon us. Look, I'm trying to get some things done around my place now. And I'm gonna tell you, one person who does some work in my place, he doesn't want to wear a mask, Shanita. I mean, at all. It's like unbelievable. And he's not hostile. He's a wonderful, wonderful guy. But I'm like, what? Do you? Just unbelievable. Unbelievable. He does not want to wear a mask. I mean, like at all. And I gave him 2 yesterday. Yeah, no, but I knew about preventing infection. I said, but you can't put droplets in my home. How about that?
Turn your mufflers up.
Ugh. I mean, Attorney Hoffler.
Good morning.
Hey, do me a favor. Can you look over that letter?
I did. I have some thoughts.
Okay. If you would, because I'm being pressed by these folks, and I think it's interesting that they, let me. I don't want to go into it here because we're on Facebook, but it's very interesting that they really need Reverend input.
Yeah, well, let me talk a little bit more about it. I have a 9 o'clock, but I said at 10 o'clock. Your time at 10 o'clock?
Yeah. 10 o'clock my time or your time?
10 o'clock my time, so 9 o'clock your time.
Perfect. That's great.
I have Miss Bishop up,
Okay.
and we have about 1 minute, and before we go back on.
Yeah, and you'll get Erin Connolly.
Yeah, I'm gonna try getting her up. Although when I called her, she did not pick up. So I'm gonna call, I believe Daryl Jones. And run back to her.
Okay. Well, don't she's got children. She's trying to get ready to get sent off to school. So just keep trying her. Okay. Is there any way you can give me a verbal without? Well, no, you wouldn't. The audience would hear you. Because I'm having to read my phone upside down, which is very hard.
If I talk quiet enough, maybe I could, but
no.
Again, I'd have to talk kind of quiet so you'd have to hear me.
It's just I'm having to text you. I'm holding the phone upside down because I'm holding the mic to the iPad, and so it's extremely difficult for me to text upside down.
Yeah. 15 seconds, by the way.
Okay.
What about if we ask Erin to, when she's on at an appropriate time, she would say good morning, Santita.
5 seconds.
Okay.
I have Attorney Jones up. I'll get Attorney Connolly up.
Okay, perfect. Well, we'll work that.
And then, I'll give you just a verbal cue through the talk.
Okay.
Attorney Connolly's up.
Perfect. We got you.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show. We're talking about responsibility, culpability when it comes to these gun deaths, these mass shootings. We've had yet another mass shooting. We've had more mass shootings in 2022 than we've had days in the year, more than 260 of them. So what do you make of this? The latest being in Tulsa at a hospital. They sat on the second floor. I wonder what was going on there. And I think that's why it's important for us to know who Peyton Gendron was, who his family was, what motivated him. Well, of course, the accused killer in Buffalo, Salvador Ramos. Um, I want to know what his story is, the background. They say when you read his story, it'll break your heart that he was bullied. I'm not saying that you have the right to kill anyone, hurt anyone when you have been hurt, when you've been bullied. But sometimes we need to look at the bullies too, because you don't need to make someone's life hell on earth just because. It's not right. So there's a whole ecosystem of hatred of which many of us, all of us are a part. If we're not opposing it, we're in it. So let's talk about that today. The people who've been missing, the institution, people have not been missing from this gun debate, this gun discussion, but institutions have been missing, corporations. We talk about institutional accountability, personal responsibility, but institutional accountability, no, we kind of pull back on that. There was a time when the NRA was protecting hunters. Now they are protecting another kind of hunter, also known as the corporations. They are now a mouthpiece for the gun manufacturers who are not being called to account for shifting their strategies. They used to sell to people who wanted to game and hunt. No, okay, now they sell to you because you need to be defending yourself. And everybody's in it. Corporate media's in it. They're frightening you to death and you're not safe, so you need to get a gun. Oh yeah. And so they're making more guns and they're making more powerful guns. This has been purposeful, everybody. And we're going to talk about this. We have an all-star panel. They've been with us all week, but you know what? I have to bring the best people to you, led by, of course, Attorney C.K. Hoffler, the chair of Rainbow Push, past national president of the National Bar Association. Of course, she's been commenting on another kind of violence, the Amber Heard Johnny Depp trial, which was very interesting. We have to talk about that one day, CK. Attorney Aaron Connolly, brilliant political strategist, and of course the chair of the Transformative Justice Coalition, Attorney Daryl Jones. But really, our beacon in this discussion has been Jennifer Bishop Jenkins. Jennifer Bishop Jenkins comes to this with, as we say in the church, Christian experience. Sadly, she lost her pregnant sister and brother, 3 people, to gun violence from a friend, from a neighbor, who had tried to kill his parents. There are warnings that we continue to ignore, but no one's talking about who sold the guns, who's making the guns, except Sandy Hook. Turns out that they have been successful. It's really a singular success in suing the rifle maker who made the gun that killed all of their beloveds. So let's start with you, Jennifer Jenkins. Jennifer Bishop Jenkins, of course, you are the former National Program Director for Victims and Solutions, for victims and survivors of the Brady campaign. That's how I met you so many decades ago. Please talk to me about the gun manufacturers, their responsibility, the gun sellers. You and Reverend Jackson have been marching for years on Chuck's Gun Shop, because we don't have a gun shop here in Chicago, but you do have Chuck's Gun Shop just across the line. And you've been protesting against this for years. And I need you to help us to understand what happened with Sandy Hook. Jennifer Bishop Jenkins.
So, yes, Santita, I think, I'm a retired history teacher, and the history of these things are so important. In actuality, you're right. The NRA originally was just a hobby hunter, people who liked to hunt organization. But in the 1970s, there was a systematic and deliberate plan to take over the board of directors of the NRA so that it became a protection organization for manufacturers of guns. And once those manufacturers took over the management of the National Rifle Association, it became an army for making sure that the making of them, the selling of them, the profit that these companies could make was protected. And that's what they worked very hard and very systematically and very successfully to do. And not only did they make a whole bunch of guns legal that no other country would allow to be legal, military weapons, weapons that hold high-capacity magazines. This is not for hunting, obviously. These would be used in war to try to spray a lot of bullets very quickly. And yet they made those legal, and then they lobbied and paid. They systematically campaigned against every state representative, every congressional representative. They got involved. And they passed in 2005 the Protection of Lawful Commerce in Arms Act, or let's call it the Immunity Bill. So you know that every single product in America is protected, that it doesn't harm people. You know, even cars had to put seatbelts in, and, you know, anything that, you know, baby cribs that weren't made safely. All of those things, people can sue the manufacturers if they make something that is harmful. But this law shielded all gun manufacturers from the logical use of their product, which was to harm people. And once that became law in 2005, nationally, federally, in the United States Congress, because of the effect of the gun lobby, that made it impossible for families like the Uvalde victims' families, or in the case of the Sandy Hook, which is the first mass shooting of little children, first graders, second graders at Sandy Hook, where 20 of them were killed. It made it impossible to sue. So the victims' families of Sandy Hook were very determined they were going to try to find some way around this. And they did, in fact, come up with a clever strategy legally to sue Remington for the way that it marketed that AR-15 assault rifle Bushmaster that the shooter in Sandy Hook used. And they found out that they could sue him as in the way that it was marketed, not what the gun itself would do, but the way that the company chose to market the guns. And they would pull out copies of ads that this young man clearly had seen. One of them said, "Manhood Restored," and a picture of their Bushmaster assault rifle. And so they sued them on the basis of their marketing strategy, that their marketing to young men specifically was psychologically trying to appeal to their insecurities, their manhood, their toxic masculinity. And they convinced the Connecticut Supreme Court that this, in fact, was did not fall under the protection of the immunity laws that had passed in 2005. And they won. They won in court, and they had bankrupted the Remington Company in a $73 million case. So that was the strategy those victims' families used to try to hold the manufacturers accountable. I'm sure that the gun lobby will be working even now to try to protect the manufacturers further from those kinds of lawsuits. We'll see what happens. But what's critical for people to do is to vote, every single person in the United States, to vote locally and during their congressional races, their Senate races, for people who will not be taking money by the gun lobby.
Jennifer Bishop Jenkins, everybody. Before I go to the rest of the panel, let me go to Pam from Chicago. Pam, what's on your mind, hon?
Hi. Good morning, Santita, and to the panel. Thank you for that discussion. Santita, many of us weren't even aware about that settlement for the Sandy Hook.
Sandy Hook, you got it.
Sandy Hook, right. Many of us, I heard a report that also on the morning show, and I thank your panelists for the clarification. So if that is the strategy that we must use in order to do something about the gun manufacturing, fine. But I really wanted to comment, Santita, on the criminality and just the utter disgust of the greed, corporate greed, and the price gouging. Santita, enough is not being said from our elected officials, calling these CEOs, businesses, and institutions out. They are price gouging, and that is, I don't know if that's part of the artificial inflation or whatever it is, but they are profiteering from not only the pandemic, but just the hurt and also the wage increases that the working class people, wage earners, fought for. And I want more of our elected officials to speak out. And yes, Santita, I have contacted them on this issue. It is really difficult to get through. So if you have to email, contact, or just go regular snail mail, do whatever you have to do. But Santita, please keep this at the forefront. Because
well, you know what I'm gonna tell you. I wish you could have been. I wish you could call at 7:30 because that is exactly what Dr. Wolf is going to talk about today. And so, you know, and we're going to continue to keep that conversation going. But I think part of what we have to also understand, Pam, is this. When you look at this social unrest, I think Dennis Blair, who's head of the United States National Intelligence Agencies, years ago, a little more than 10 years ago, talked about the economic inequality and how that was going to stir social unrest. Dr. King said that riots are the language of the unheard. And I would make, you know, people have said all kinds of things about January 6th, but January 6th, in part, this is what we're talking about. People really feel shafted here. They really, really do. They feel like the American dream is beyond their grasp and there's nothing that they or their children will be able to do to access it. And that is a problem. And that's why we're also talking about corporate responsibility here as we talk about these gun manufacturers and these gun sellers, Pam. Because they're, you know, we're just seeing Pam and CK, pardon me, you know, I'm in the city. We're seeing they're still being protected, CK. I mean, the people who do the killing, they're protected. We don't know their names. We don't know their stories. We don't know why they did what they did. But we also do not know the gun manufacturers. They have not been part of this discussion at all. You don't even have the NRA on television debating this. You have the victims. We don't discuss the shooters. We just talk to the victims. That's it. I mean, what about the gun manufacturers, CK? What about the gun sellers? Is there anything that can be done? Using Sandy Hook as an example, maybe, right?
Right. Well, Santita, absolutely there's something that can be done, and there's something that's been done in the past. I have to equate this to tobacco litigation and opioid litigation. So if we're talking about what can be done in the court, let's start there. Certainly families can sue and families will sue. But what we have seen with some of these shooting cases is, you know, the police departments are sued if it's excessive use of force. Individuals are sued and named, especially if they have resources and money. We typically see that, but we don't see the creativity behind some of the litigation where you sue the gun manufacturers and all of that, and the stores that sold. Well, now it's so easy to get a gun, but before it was more difficult, and you could tie the stores that sold the guns to the individuals without doing proper background checks, so you would have the nexus. So you could also, before people would sue the gun manufacturers, the producers, everybody in the chain of command, starting with the manufacturers, sometimes the marketing companies, those who may have duped or been negligent in the process. So yes, you can hold the gun manufacturers accountable. You can sue them. They oftentimes get out of litigation if they are sued because maybe the proper nexus is not established. You can't establish if somebody got a gun out from the street, if somebody got a gun from the black market, if somebody got a gun stole a gun from an uncle to the this to that, who properly had a license, this is when they did background checks, had gone through training and all this kind of stuff, then that nexus wasn't there. But you certainly can hold them accountable, especially now. And I think with these mass shooting cases, and I'm pretty certain, I haven't spoken to Ben Crump about this, I do speak to him regularly about these cases, but I haven't spoken about this angle. But I'm pretty certain that he's going to loop in the gun manufacturers in the litigation. And I think that should be part of the strategy. You have to hit people where it hurts.
and until it's really hurting, and that is combined with legislation that really makes it hurt for them, then you're not going to have a change. So let's go to the second part. There's the litigation, then there's the legislation. We have now, members of Congress and the U.S. Senate that are debating. I hear this debating. While they've been debating, there's been another mass shooting. Mm-hmm. So they're debating what they should do, how they should address gun control. And I'm being critical and sarcastic about it because if that 10 people were murdered in the past month in Buffalo, New York, my hometown, and 3 others injured, a community decimated by it. So people are afraid now to go to the grocery store because it happened at a grocery store. That 19 children were murdered, 4th graders mostly murdered, at a school, elementary school, and 2 adult teachers protecting them. So now people are afraid to go to school, even though we're on recess. So when you come back, and kids are traumatized throughout the country. And now hospitals aren't safe. I don't know all the details of the mass shooting yesterday. Santita, you and I were talking on the phone, and we got word of, I was looking at the news in the background, another mass shooting in Oklahoma. So we have Buffalo, we have Texas, we've got Oklahoma, and those are the ones that are reported. We know that there are mass shootings that are not reported because maybe they didn't shoot and kill people. They attempted to, and so it goes unnoticed. So maybe it's in a city like Cleveland, where people simply, in the inner city, where people simply don't care, and so it doesn't get reported by a lot of the corporate media or mainstream media that we hear and see. So until we have legislation on a federal level, legislation on state level, policies, procedures implemented on local level against gun manufacturers, against easy access to guns, and programs like we used to have where people would have the ability to turn in guns without getting, without having any criminal ramifications. Until we have that, and people protesting the way that they protested when George Floyd was murdered, protested when Ahmaud Arbery was murdered, and on and on and on. When you have a grassroots component, we're not going to see the kind of change, because you can't have the litigation in court that's not accompanied by legislation on a federal level, legislation on a state level, and also the grassroots component. All 3 of those things need to really be in place continuously, because otherwise it will just continue. Because the trillion-dollar industry can forgive me for saying this term, out-Trump all the other efforts, because it's a trillion-dollar industry. And by the way, ironically, as we're talking about gun control, we're spending money for guns and weapons to the Ukraine. I'm just saying that. Ironically. What's the irony of that?
You're not just saying anything. I mean, now we're sending drones and missiles that can actually that are going to be able to hit Russia. I'm like, are you serious? you all don't even have a peace process here. And the drone, Dr. King said 50 years ago, the bombs we drop overseas will explode at home. That is what we're saying. You just
absolutely. And how can we tell our children, well, war is bad. We shouldn't be engaged in war. We shouldn't be engaged in gun violence. We shouldn't do this. When we are actively engaged in that nationwide, actively engaged in it internationally. Mm-hmm. Now, the comments I'm making are just comments. The irony, the rhetoric, the killing, the impact on our communities. Because we're all tired of seeing this. We all want to see something different. Because it's hitting home. See, before it was 5-10 states away. In Chicago and Illinois, it's been hitting home for a long time. But for many others, it was 5 states away. It was sort of crazy Florida. It was ridiculous Texas. It was something of Buffalo. Now we're getting into places where you wouldn't expect this impact in communities that are like home. So it is having a different impact on our country. So this is the time. But we can't be able to stop all this ridiculous talking and do something about it. And that's how I see it, Santita.
Well, but that's a big deal. Attorney Jones, Aaron, I'm going to get to you on the other side of the break when we bring on hopefully future Congressman Jonathan Jackson. But you have a lot of great people running, and everybody. I've been reaching out to these other candidates, but they won't reach back out to me. Whoever you're supporting, call them and tell them to call me back. Attorney Jones, we don't hear about the gun manufacturers and the gun sellers. No one's talking to them. No, I've not seen a corporate media outlet go to a gun store and ask them. No, we don't even know where Peyton Gendron got his guns. Salvador Ramos. Why don't we ask them, why did you sell him a gun? Oh, it was legal. Why? If they're supposed to be mentally ill. So you talk to you. We have about 2.5 minutes before we go to break.
And you're absolutely right, Santita. We do need to revisit the law that the protection of lawful commerce law that we heard Jennifer Jenkins speak of. That needs to be revisited, and this is the opportune time to do it. We know that members of the Senate are now trying to figure out what to do. Whether it's Chris Murphy or Graham or Blumenthal, whichever one of the members of the Senate you want to go to. This is the opportune time right now when this is the hot topic, when this is what people are talking about. This is when we can now go in and say, we need the manufacturers to be held responsible. We need exceptions. We need removal or replacement or amendment of the protection of lawful commerce law, because they should not be protected when they put these killing machines, these weapons, into our society, into the hands, whether they know or didn't know, but should have anticipated they're going to end up killing people. We've got to have something that's in place. This is the moment. I encourage everybody to call 202-225-3121 and tell them to repeal the protection of lawful commerce and protect the citizens of our country. Santita, we've got to do this. We've got to do it.
We've got to do it. I mean, look, Aaron, I promise you're going to get more time on the other side of the break. We have about 1.5 minutes. This is insane. But I've noticed that these media outlets have not gone to talk to one gun seller. They have not gone to any of these corporations, to the headquarters, just as Michael Moore would do, and ask to speak to them. Remember when he went to, I think it was the GM back in the 80s? He said, wait a minute, you're decimating the workers. Don't you think they should be talking to the gun sellers and to the gun manufacturers and to the NRA? Minute belongs to you.
Absolutely. Yes, they should be at every corporate board meeting. That's the tactic I from an organizing perspective, we need to take on. We need to be targeting the people that are supporting these companies from within and from the outside, and the folks who are getting the donations. Let's take a look at who is getting the highest ratings from the NRA. Ted Cruz certainly has an A rating. The money he receives is not just from the NRA. It's from these gun manufacturers. It's from the people that work there. It's from the lobbyists who support them. And it's from other folks who want to make money off killing people. Let's follow that money.
Follow the money. And demand that these news organizations go to find. I know you know where Peyton Gendron bought those guns, bought that gun or those guns that killed the people in Buffalo. He had planned to kill not just people at the store. He had planned to walk through the black section of Buffalo and kill every black person he could find. You mean to tell me that's not newsworthy? Salvador Ramos was able to go purchase a gun, at least one. And then he killed 21 people. You got to count Joe Garcia too, because he died 2 days after he put flowers at the memorial of his wife. So the 22 people died in Uvalde. Don't forget Joe Garcia. Goodness gracious. But these folks don't have a problem running to your house, harassing you about some little petty crime that you've done or some crime that you've done. No. They'll harass an individual, but a corporation, they'll leave them alone. Maybe it's because it's corporate media. I don't know. But I certainly do believe that people who sell these guns and people who make these guns and people who advocate for those who sell the guns ought to be held to account. That's the NRA, that's the gun makers, because it's about 4 or 5 of them who control more than between 60 and 70% of the market in the United States. So I think they need to be called to account. Back in just a minute. What do you all think? You're right, Kaiser. They know who bought these guns. They know exactly what's going on. But they have chosen to protect them, like they've chosen to protect the shooters, the gunmen. What? No. I want to know what their stories are. And I think you need to put a face on these gun sellers. Aaron, Daryl, Jennifer, CK.
Well, Santita, when we come back, I'd love to tell a story about our organizing efforts in 2013, 2014, after Sandy Hook, and how we worked with people who own gun stores who said, we need background checks. I don't want to be liable for something like this. I am here advocating to my senators to say, we are trying to help people hunt. We don't want to sell these weapons to people, and we need a better system. But it's not the big gun manufacturers. These are individual folks who are out in the desert who are serving their, hunting community, and they're now liable because the government won't do its job, right? So there are people who are trying to manage this in the right way, I think.
Oh, I think so. But you remember when not enough of us, and remember when we were debating, the corporate bailout that really just put America financially in a precarious position, because it's been a multi-trillion-dollar bailout, which matches our national debt. More than $20 trillion were given to Wall Street. Remember, our senator here, Aaron, Dick Durbin, just shrugged his shoulders, almost in, resignation. He said, remember, the bankers own this place. I mean, that's why you can't move on student loan debt, because the bankers control everything. But we don't give them a face. We just talk about these students and they just wanted to go to school for free. Other countries invest in their human capital. They don't just use them like they used Black people in slavery. I mean, what is this?
This is why I think one of the most important things we can do is work to, repeal the Citizens United Supreme Court decision, which protects money in politics. I mean, this is about the fact that you cannot get anything through the Republican, wing of the House or the Senate federally, and that is because money is everything to those people. Their votes are bought and paid for, and we can't even know who's giving them money since Citizens United, and we have got to, if we can't own our own elected officials, that's why they're not acting in our best interests.
Well,
it does come down to the money.
And really holding and really calling out corporate media for being who they are. There's a reason that the founding fathers advocated for a free press, a protected press, not the media. Just, you've got to, in order to keep the republic, let alone have a democracy, in order to keep the republic, in order for this not to be a monarchy, to have a constitutional republic, you need to have people who can tell the truth.
Yeah.
And who can hold these institutions, public and private, to account. We don't do that now. I mean, this media complex, this corporate media complex, they're part of the problem because they're part of it. They're the ones who are selling the pharmaceuticals. And I'm talking about all of the drugs. If you just turn away during the commercials, they make you feel you're sick. And you go to your doctor, ask them for something you probably do not need. You had a headache. Go to sleep. What is this? Doctor, I think I've got something. Yeah, it's called life. Your butt's getting old. That's what's happening.
Miss Jackson, I have Mr. Jackson on the line.
Oh, okay. Let me say hello to him. I hope he didn't hear me say but. My brother would be disappointed. How you doing, Jonathan?
How are you?
I'm doing well. Can you bring that down in the background just a little bit so I can make sure we have a good connection with him? Thank you, sweetie. Jonathan, can you speak? Okay, well, Jonathan, we've got your dear beloved Jennifer Bishop Jenkins with you, and Attorney C.K. Hoffler, and Attorney Aaron Connolly, and Attorney Daryl Jones. Everybody, Jonathan's there. Hey.
Good morning. We have about 1 minute till we're back up.
Jonathan?
I'll come down to your June 13th event.
Oh, that'd be great. Oh, absolutely. Please.
I'm planning on it.
Okay. And we'll sit together, Jennifer.
I'd love that.
Okay.
Yeah, I want you to be prepared to say some words. And Santita, I need you to. I want you to help moderate parts of the program.
Oh, okay. I just plan to be there to be supportive, but I'll do it.
So don't be surprised that I couldn't make it to the 100 Black Men event last night because I had to come to D.C. for an event. And so, you know who I asked to be my surrogate?
Who?
President Emil Jones.
Ah, I love it. Oh, I know. He said, Jonathan, are you sure you want?
20 seconds.
Oh, this is great. Oh, boy. But Joyce, I have been inviting the other candidates onto the show, just so that you know. Of course I support my brother, but these are all people we know. And so they're not enemies. They're just people, everybody wants, the same job.
The Santita Jackson Show.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show. It's a joy to be with you today on the Santita Jackson Show as we talk about gun violence and accountability. Haven't you noticed that we haven't seen the gun sellers or the gun manufacturers on television explaining why they're making more guns, why they're selling more guns? We're talking to individuals. We're talking to victims. We don't even know who the so-called gunmen and the shooters are. Oh, I'm Santita Jackson, coming to you from WCPT 820, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota, and the Santita Jackson and Friends page. Everybody, meet me over there, but please migrate, if you can, over to the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel, the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel, because I'm getting a lot of traffic. Facebook reached out to me and they said you need to point your people to your YouTube channel. So please get on over there. Hey, Larshawn. Hey, Daryl. Hey, Joyce. Sending you all much love. We're joined by congressional candidate Jonathan Jackson as we talk about the key role that firearms makers play in America's gun culture and why they're being protected, shielded from this debate. What about the gun makers, the gun manufacturers? Call me at 773-763-9278. 773-763-9278, and let us talk about it right here on the Santita Jackson Show. And Dr. Max Wolf, of course, will be with us to talk about something that you all have asked me to ask him about, your interest rates and inflation, and on and on and on and on. Our prayers are with the people of Tulsa today as they had to deal with a mass shooting. 5 people were killed. That is including the gunman, whose name we do not know. But he walked into a hospital to the 2nd floor, and what was described by the Tulsa police captain, Richard Muhlenberg, as a catastrophic scene. He killed 4 people and then killed himself. By the way, more than half of the gun deaths in the United States are gun deaths by suicide, everybody. President Joe Biden said yesterday there's little he can do to lower the cost of gasoline or food at the moment. He said, quote, there's a lot going on right now, but the idea that we're going to be able to click a switch, bring down the cost of gasoline is not likely in the near term, nor is it with regard to food. In the meantime, corporations are experiencing a windfall that they have not seen since 1990, according to Bloomberg. They're making more money than they have made since 1990. Well, it seems that the war in the Ukraine, at least on the American side, is amping up. The war against Russia. President Biden plans to sell armed attack drones, to Ukraine. That will go farther than anything they have thus far. Indeed, Medea Benjamin, the co-founder of the progressive anti-war group Code Pink, said the slippery slope leading to a direct U.S. confrontation with Russia just got a lot steeper, everybody. excuse me, as the U.S. plans to send advanced missiles to Russia. Oh, gosh, this is terrible. Excuse me. In the meantime, 48 lawmakers unveil a measure to end unauthorized U.S. involvement on the war in Yemen. We are there still, everybody. So much to talk about on the Santita Jackson Show. In the meantime, as we go to this discussion about guns, excuse me, and gun violence, there we go. I want to talk to you about financial freedom, which is what we're going to be talking about with Dr. Max Wolf at the bottom of the hour. Team Hochberg can help you purchase a new home, refinance your existing home, secure a VA loan or reverse mortgage, or they can help you to rebuild your credit, eliminate your credit card debt. They can help you. Call them at 855-56-DAVID, 855-56-DAVID, or visit them at 56david.com. They can help you even in this difficult time. David, interestingly enough, posted a 5-star Google review about Team Hochberg after working with them. See, he called them, reached out to them, and had a free consultation. He shared with them his dilemma. Believe me, they've heard it all, everybody. And they have worked with people, and they're miracle workers, quite frankly. David said, quote, "My wife and I made good money, but had no way to pay off our credit card debt." I'm sure you can understand that, everybody. So I called Team Hochberg and worked with Mark Zinner, who helped them to pay off, get this, everybody, a $45,000 credit card debt. $45,000 credit card debt, eliminating their stress and giving them a happy home. You can read David's Google review along with so many others. Just Google Team Hochberg, you'll see. So call them at 855-56-DAVID or visit 56david.com and get on the road to financial freedom. Everybody, you know, we've been talking about voter suppression and really what's really happening with our vote. Well, you know, I think there's a new form of voter suppression. Corporate media won't even tell you that the election is coming up and that people are running. There will be a town hall meeting. Jonathan Jackson for Congress will have a town hall meeting Monday, June 13th, 6 to 8 p.m. at the New Covenant Missionary Baptist Church. I want you to be there. I'm going to be one of the moderators. Jennifer Bishop Jenkins will be one of the panelists there. 754 East 77th Street, hosted by the Jonathan Jackson for Congress Ministers Committee. Hope that you will be there Monday, June 13th. We'll be talking about this and other issues. Everyone continues to talk. Jonathan Jackson is joining us right now, joining C.K. Hoffler and Jennifer Bishop Jenkins and Daryl Jones, attorneys Daryl Jones, Aaron Connolly, and C.K. Hoffler. Jonathan Jackson, interestingly enough, ironically enough, you had sent out a position paper just before Uvalde. Gun violence has been on your mind, and what we've been talking about today is how it's so interesting. People are put on Front Street, personal responsibility, but corporate accountability, we don't want to talk about it. We have not seen a gun manufacturer, a gun seller on TV discussing why they sold the guns to these gunmen and why they're making more guns, more lethal guns than ever before. Do you think it's time for us to now begin to look at holding gun manufacturers and sellers to account?
Absolutely. Santita, all products have liability and can be held accountable under some measure of the law. But in 2005, Congress passed the Protection of Lawful Commerce in Arms Act under President Bush. The Protection of Lawful Commerce in Arms Act, which gave the gun industry an unprecedented level of immunity from civil liability. People have to be held accountable. We've seen this in the auto industry with tires. We've seen it in the auto industry with airbags. We've seen this in the toy industry. We've seen it in the food industry, but not in the gun industry. And that's because they're very influential lobbyists, and they use this power, and they culminated in 34 states and finally at the federal level to shield them from this liability. Turn that law around, get rid of it, make them on par with every other law for every other consumer product. We'll be able to put an end to the sale of arms. And I want to make sure that we separate the two on saying all of these mass murders have something to do with mental illness. That's not true. Mental illness has its problems. Some of these people do have mental illnesses, but it's their access to guns. you have mental illnesses that don't have access to guns don't commit these atrocities. You have to be very specific. It's their access to guns heightened with some other condition that they have, but not to say that people with mental illnesses have a proclivity towards this level of violence. They have access to the tools, then you can see some of these crimes committed on this mass scale. And what I'm most concerned about is these crimes are now being committed in increasing numbers, and the violence and the attacks are becoming even more lethal. I mean, these are now people are dying in the dozens on these mass attacks. These aren't these mass shootings used to be counted as 3 or 4 persons. Now the killings are in the teens, and they're increasing because of the weapons that they have access to. And an 18-year-old that cannot buy a beer can buy an assault weapon. Everything about that is wrong. And to further say it, before I conclude, is our Department of Education at the federal level is, I think, $70 billion. Our U.S. Department of Defense is $800 billion. We are spending 10x on the Defense Department over education. I know there's city, state, county that would make that up to $120 billion, but it's not a federal priority to have our citizens more educated and more powerful than our Defense Department. I think that's fundamentally wrong, and Reverend Martin Luther King warned us about this 50 years ago.
We're talking with Jonathan Jackson and our panel. Let me just open this up. Aaron, you wanted to say something on the other side of the break, Attorney Aaron Connolly?
Yes, good morning. Good morning, Jonathan. It's great to hear that perspective from you, and I think it's a great history lesson for many of us to remember how that happened, right? And how we continue to allow corporate interests and lobbyists to make choices for us. And what we've done now is we've given corporations personhood, right, in Citizens United. But we're now elevating them to a higher level of citizenship than the people in this country, the real people. And I've had the honor of organizing with those real people on this issue, and the parents and family members of folks who did not survive gun violence, the survivors who have, fought for their lives, and many have physical and other types of disabilities from suffering that violence. And when I did that work in Arizona, and we were putting pressure on, at that time, Senator Flake and Senator McCain, right after Sandy Hook, I had just found out I was pregnant with John, and I did all of that organizing pregnant in the desert with these families, and listening to the families who just lost children in Sandy Hook, who came to organize with us because they knew those votes mattered. We ended up convincing Senator McCain to vote for that gun violence prevention bill. Senator Flake cared more about his NRA rating than the children of Sandy Hook and the future victims of gun violence in this country, and did not vote the right way. And I think there's a big difference in both of those legacies in their voting records. And it's frustrating to see, 10 years later, my son, is now going into 4th grade, and we still don't have that legislation passed, and we still don't have that kind of justice for our families. We stood with Gabrielle Giffords and Mark Kelly, who at the time was an astronaut, not a senator in Arizona. Now he's sitting in that office, right? But so that organizing has worked. But we still don't have that piece of the legislation. We're still not holding gun manufacturers accountable. We're still not holding the parents of folks accountable who ignore these warning signs and let violence occur on their watch. There's things that we can do as deterrents that we don't have an interest in because of these corporate weapons companies that we have to purchase other items from to fund our imperialist tactics around the world, right? And so we have to decide what's more important.
I want you to continue to call me at 773-763-9278. Jennifer Bishop Jenkins, you have had to, Jonathan is ambitious to go to Congress, and you've had to work with Congress. What's the holdup? I mean, there's a disconnect between the people who we've elected to represent us and how we're really feeling out here.
So I worked with the families of Virginia Tech to try to make sure that at least the background check system, which has been in place, the Brady Law, ever since President Reagan's shooting, that, you know, we have laws that are supposed to at least help us to identify and prevent people. And we did, we did actually, have some success after Virginia Tech working the halls of Congress as I went with those victims' families to try to, with the Brady campaign, to try to get at least some more funding to the background check system so that, for example, Cho, the shooter at Virginia Tech, that they could have found out that he wasn't supposed to have a gun. But the background check information had not been reported because they just were backed up and they didn't have the staffing and the paperwork. They didn't have a way to get to the National Institute Check system that's run by the government. So, we have to make sure that these systems work and that they're funded. But the problem is that ever since the gun lobby worked a long strategy, and they took over the NRA in the 70s, and then they started making sure that the manufacturer, the profit motivation of these manufacturers is it's money. And then they use targeted political donations that are shielded now under Citizens United, and they can give all the money and just buy and pay for these U.S. congressmen and U.S. senators and keep them from passing any kind of law that would allow these multi-trillion-dollar, multi-billion-dollar profitable industries that are making and selling death. That is what they do. They just think there are more guns in the United States than there are people. And that's because it's a very profitable industry. So we need to take away the profit motive. We need to repeal the immunity laws that keep people from suing them for their... if you've ever seen the advertisements that these companies put into magazines targeting young men and their insecurities and their toxic masculinity and their feelings of not being worthy and not being tough enough. They have advertisements that say things like, picture of an assault weapon and there's your manhood. And this is why people like the shooter in Uvalde, Texas, the minute he turned 18, he could buy one of those legally, and he did just that because he thought that would make him tough.
I mean, and
all that.
And it makes him tough. Yeah, right. And it makes us unsafe. It's killing us. I've got about 4.5 minutes left in this segment. I want to get a minute from each of you before we go. Jonathan, you might want to stick around for Dr. Max Wolf, who'll be talking about inflation and all these things. And should you get to Congress? And even if you don't go to Congress, these are the issues that you've been working on that you'll still be working on no matter what. I want to find out from you, Attorney Darrell Jones, what about taking the fight to the manufacturers and the gun sellers? What about shining a light on them? Corporate media, they're not doing that. They're not even in the discussion. It's like they bear no responsibility. They just make money. Attorney Darrell Jones, 1 minute.
Yeah, and thank you, Santita. You're absolutely right. We need to shine the light on the manufacturers. There's got to be an economic deterrent that goes along with it, and that was the beauty of what CK was presenting earlier about holding those gun manufacturers liable. But more importantly, as they're going to the NRA conference, we need to have cameras down there that are asking them the Michael Moore questions. We see this happening to children. We see this happening to seniors. We see the killings happening across the country. What is your response? Don't you feel as though you have some responsibility? You bear some burden for the lives that are being lost here in the United States as a result of the use of your weapons, particularly those weapons that are meant for military use that are on the streets. So, and I applaud the efforts of senators that are now, we as voters, we've got to check our voting registration, and then we got to ask the question of, what are the elected representatives doing? Where do they stand? Where do they stand on red flag laws, background checks? raising the age requirement to own the handguns and the assault weapons. We need to be certain that we know where our elected officials stand, where the candidates for representatives stand, and we support those that support our interests in protecting our communities throughout our country, Santita. But we got to start by turning on the light so that the roaches scatter with regards to holding those manufacturers responsible and knowing what they're up to and making them be on record with regards to what they're doing to our people here in this country.
The roaches? Oh my. The roaches scatter. I love it. You know what, Attorney C.K. Hoffler, I've got just under a minute for you.
Well, thank you. I mean, I echo what Daryl Jones just said, what I've heard actually on this panel, and that is a call to action. Without a question, litigation is one way to hold those gun manufacturers accountable, but that's not going to mean anything unless it's accompanied by the other aspects of it. And by the way, let's hold the parents accountable when, as they're doing outside of Detroit in that case, because a lot of times the parents have knowledge. And let's also not allow the gun manufacturers to use as a scapegoat mental illness. Let's not let them off the hook, because they will say, well, it really isn't our fault. We couldn't have prevented it even if we had other measures in place that were more rigid, because of mental illness. So we do not need to allow them to be left off the hook, because if they weren't giving access to anyone and everybody in the world for these types of guns, then people who may be challenged from a mental standpoint wouldn't have the ability to so easily access them. So absolutely, Santita, hold them accountable without a question, through litigation, through activism, and through legislation.
Jonathan, will you be talking about this in your town hall meeting? I know you're going to have Jennifer Bishop Jenkins there. I'll be one of the moderators Monday, June 13th at New Covenant Missionary Baptist Church, the great church from Pastor Stephen Thurston Sr., 754 East 77th. I urge you all to get on out there. Get there early, because we're gonna pack out the house. Got a minute for you, John. I mean, what do you think we need to do? Should we shine a light on the manufacturers and the sellers?
Yeah, we absolutely have to. I want people to come out to the town hall meeting. It's very important. I want to hear people's voices. Jennifer Bishop, a dear friend, she has a very compelling and telling story on the murder of her sister and her relatives. We have to get people to talk about this. 45,000 people are killed and shot in America every year. Half of those are with suicide. It is a plague. It's an epidemic right here. It's part of the culture. We can turn it around, but we can no longer be silent. We can no longer take a backseat to those persons that are the sellers and the profiteers and the purveyors of this violence. And I tell you, I'm afraid to even have mass meetings with fear of violence when there are large crowds. So please be prayerful and let's be safe. And come on out.
Come on out, and and everybody, let's talk about inflation. I mean, because there's a lot of instability and really hurt and unrest that's being stirred by this economic instability. We're going to be talking about that with Dr. Max Wolf. He's talking about your rising interest rates, inflation. Janet Yellen said, "Oh my goodness, I didn't know that this was not going to be transitory." Are you serious? And corporations are making more money than ever before. Some people are saying it's a plan. So I want to know what your thoughts are. And how are you dealing with, do you think gas is going to be $6 a gallon? Jonathan, real quick. I got 10 seconds.
I think gas, I'm sorry, Santita.
Do you think it'll be $6 a gallon? It's already there in California, some parts.
On 87 in Cottage Grove, it's $6.99 for premium.
Okay, so there we go. Okay. Well, it's already here. I'm sorry. I was late. I don't drive, everybody. My brother will pick me up when he can. All right, let's talk about it on the Santita Jackson Show. Back in a minute. Goodness gracious. $6.99? Are you serious?
I'm spending $70, $75 for 3/4 of a tank. Yeah.
What, have you gotten rid of your family mobile?
But you know what they can do in Atlanta, I'm spending over $100.
Are you serious?
Over $100 every time I pull my tire. We love our electric car.
Well, Dr. Wolf is coming on.
I need an electric car too. That's what I need to do.
Yeah, oh yeah.
We have a gas-powered one for when we have to make a longer trip across country, but we definitely we love our electric car.
Okay. Wow. I mean, that's unbelievable. It's disincentivizing private ownership, quite frankly, you know, of your car.
Ms. Jackson, I have on Dr. Wolf.
Yeah.
And just as a heads up, we have Anita from North Carolina. She still
She-
wants to talk about gun violence.
Just
And then Noel has a question for Mr. Jackson.
Jonathan, can you stay for a hot second?
Yes, please.
Okay, say hello to Dr. Wolf. He's there.
Hey, Doctor, I hear that all the time.
Love you. Yes. I need to send you that information so you can, well, you'll be ready. I know I'm, okay. All right. Dr. Wolf. All right. Dr. Wolf, you and Jonathan can go for it.
Hey, Doc, where's the airport live? That's why I say send me that material so I can pass that. Oh, do it now.
Okay. I have thoroughly, we've been talking about the gun manufacturers, Max, and whether, you know, because they've been excluded from this discussion.
I've got a good friend at the Supreme Court, Jerry, Supreme Court.
What now?
The gun manufacturers have got a year from the Supreme Court.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
I think it's part of the culture of life.
Are these the pro-lifers?
Always all about that life.
You know what? Jonathan, I don't know what we're going to do with Dr. Wolf. Did you say that?
30 seconds. 30 minutes.
Jonathan, I'm going to send you a story today. It comes out of the American Prospect and Common Dreams. How the GOP are investing in community centers in Black and Latino communities. Oh yeah. I'll send it to you and Max. Tremendous story.
Sounds like an advertorial.
Okay.
30 seconds.
All right. I have a question. You know, Noel wants to say something to Jonathan, as does Anita, and Tim is here. Wow. Well, you know, it's going to be a mixed bag. You know what? Dovetail.
Hey, Ms. Jackson, I'm pretty sure Tim actually dropped, so it's just Noel and Anita.
Okay. You know, you can dovetail these economic issues into this violence that we see in the culture. I know you can do that.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Santita Jackson Show. You know, it's bottom of the hour on Thursday, which means we have Dr. Max Wolf, brilliant economist, talking with us about all matters economic, social, political, cultural. He does it all. He makes the wonderful connections, and that's why you love him so. And Jonathan Jackson decided to hang around with us. He and Dr. Wolf are very dear friends, and really, they're wonderful together. Of course, Jonathan Jackson will have his town hall meeting. He's your only friend. You forgot about me?
I
respectful of your taste for that.
Anyway, that having been said, we have been looking at Janet Yellen, the Treasury Secretary, who said, I got it wrong about inflation in 2021. I mean, it's really not transitory. It's actually here. And now we have got, Jonathan just told me, right here on the south side of Chicago, Dr. Wolf, gas $6.99 a gallon premium at one gas station. And that's spreading. Wow, that's a lot, everybody. It's a lot. And now people are trying to figure out how they can pay their mortgages. That's why we're going to have David Hochberg on next week to help you to figure out how you can pay your mortgages, because people are paying more and more and more, and they just can't get out from under. I don't even know where to begin, Dr. Wolf, but we've got Jonathan Jackson still there, and we still have a lot of callers who want to talk about gas prices, who want to talk about guns, they want to talk about everything. Why do you think all this stuff is, even when we're talking about people's economic pain, they want to talk about everything, Dr. Wolf? I mean, like everything.
Well, look, I mean, part of the explanations of each of these pieces fit together like puzzle pieces, and some of them don't, right? So there are always uniquenesses to each of these social features. But I mean, clearly the war in Ukraine and the supply chain disruption have created kind of a perfect storm for the cost of anything related to transport because of gas, also cars, used cars, chips, because of the pandemic and the war and the supply chain issues. That's a lot, right? So you have those are all kind of supply chain issues because the pandemic changed who could work when, how exports were done from different countries. And I think the thing we're still kind of not admitting to ourselves is it's a moving target. The pandemic isn't over, but something changed in the way capital and labor relate. People do not feel the same way about their jobs. Employers want people to go back to the same old job, and people aren't going to do it because the relationship broke down, I think, in the lack of messaging and protection that a lot of people experienced at work. And then even if your employer did a lot of things right, risking your life with an angry public for a little bit less than it costs to pay for life doesn't look like quite as good as a deal as it used to. And people wanted to believe that was because we gave a little bit of public assistance, but it pretty clearly isn't. It's because you can't put that toothpaste back in the tube. So how people feel about where they fit in the economy and what they're willing to do for a buck has shifted. And so that's changing the way everything is produced. And the other universal input to production is energy, largely, but not only oil and gas and fuels to move things and people around. And the war in Ukraine has really dislocated that, as well as the fact that we're in a weird moment in how we move around the world. So there is zero investment in producing one more drop of oil as the oil prices have surged for a year. And so anybody who's making money on this is just enjoying the high prices, but they're not investing in the future because we know we don't have a huge future with fossil fuel. Some people want to pretend we do because they're in the business of that, but either we get off these fuels or we kill off the human race. And the demand for motor fuels from rats and cockroaches isn't that high. So if we don't control ourselves and we exterminate ourselves, that also acts to reduce the future demand for carbon-based fuel. So there's no interest in investing and putting more stuff on the market generally, or very little. And even if you want to, there are labor issues, and there are labor issues in all kinds of other areas. And then there's just supply disruptions from losing your labor force. Sometimes people who don't understand that quote-unquote unskilled labor is skilled forget that when you lose a whole bunch of people who make the plant work or move things around or drive the trucks, you can't press a button and get new ones. People have to learn things, they have to be trained, and they have to be willing to do those jobs, and they have to be willing to do them at a certain salary. And if all those things start to heave and buckle at the same time, well then, you have a problem. And I hate to be the one who keeps bringing up, but that elective trade war we had with China, so that Donald Trump could look tough to part of his constituencies, and also to address some real issues economically that we had in the past, was a slam into the supply chain, right? This America First notion of walking away from free trade toward narrow nationalism, that was a very successful export. The reason you don't do that is because everyone else does it too. It's always nice if you do it and no one else does, right? But it never worked. So that was a global export. And then we had a pandemic, which was ongoing, with lockdowns and disruptions. Then we had a shift in the way capital and labor feel about work and working together, and we're involved in a bit of a standoff there. and now we have a significant war with one of the top 3 producers of oil in the world, and we don't have anyone putting new product into the market, really, because they're enjoying the high prices, and so we kind of have this weird swirl of events, and then that obviously smacks into the food business, because wheat is such a base product, and wheat comes a lot from Ukraine and Russia, who are at war. There's been a lot of bans for export, so around the world, there's been disruptions in all kinds of foodstuffs, rice, etc. And then in the U.S., we have a pretty significant bird flu outbreak, which is affecting the price of chicken and eggs, because we've now had to kill tens of millions of birds. So, I mean, there's just a lot going on, and people love the magic bullet that explains it all, but there isn't one, kind of, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you see the world. And there's been a concerted multi-billion-dollar effort to convince everyone that the Democrats, and if you elect a bunch of people who have had a private conversation with Q, these problems will go away. And while that might be heartwarming in some circles, there's no pizzeria in Washington, D.C. that you can shoot up and solve this problem.
Oh. Ooh, everybody, we're talking with Dr. Max Wolf. Jonathan Jackson's still hanging out with us as we talk about inflation and just really how we get out from under, because inflation is permeating all of our lives. I mean, people are now trying to figure out how to pay their mortgages. I mean, or they're not even thinking about buying houses. We've lost 300,000 Black people in the city of Chicago. They can't afford to live here. I mean, Jonathan Jackson, where do we go from here? I mean, because it's just, we're watching people leave. Well, not just Black people leave Chicago. We're watching people leave the cities because they cannot afford to pay rent, let alone pay a mortgage in the cities in which they work. Is anyone even talking about that? And is there anything that Congress, both houses, can do to mitigate this?
Santita, someone has to talk about the big picture, the overarching issues that are connecting all of us, that are speaking to the depth of the problem. We're not addressing the scope of the solutions to the size of the problems. That people are working, and they're working hard every day, but they're not making enough to make ends meet. I like this metric they're using called ALICE, ALICE, Asset Limited, Income Constrained and Employed, fancy title for the working poor. That people that are working in McDonald's, that are working 2 shifts, that are working 2 different jobs, and have limited access to mass transportation. I mean, all of these things now are compounding the stress in the Americans' lives, which is creating further obesity, sleep deprivation. It's bringing on future health problems now. We're creating the problems because people are so stressed out. And as sure as you and I are talking now, we already know that there's 26 different strands of the genome variants of what can be pandemics and pandemics that can be in the future. And we also know that an ounce of prevention is worth more than a pound of flesh. So COVID is not over. There's long-term illness associated with sickness. More people are sick than we think that are now permanently out of the labor force. And we're about to go into another surge this fall. And we're not doing anything on preparation for the future. So I say we have to plan for the big picture. No one's talking about it. That's probably one of the most frustrating things for me, that we're walking into a storm. When I see that a tornado hit in Minnesota this last week, and temperature swings are happening in Chicago within 30 and 40 degrees within 2 days, we're not even close to hurricane season and tornado season for the Midwest. Climate change is real, and we're not addressing any of these issues. So when that tornado went through Kentucky and Illinois and parts of Oklahoma last year, that was 200 miles long and might have touched a piece of Ohio, that's unprecedented. We're not even talking about the bigger pictures, and sure, these are constant stressors, and they're only going to be compounded. So I agree with everything that Dr. Wolf says, one of my teachers and mentors, and we've got some major challenges ahead, but I'm hopeful and confident that we can do better.
Well, let me ask you about this, Dr. Wolf. 2 in 3 adults avoid social events because they're embarrassed about their financial struggles. Now, that comes from one poll conducted on behalf of Beyond Finance for Mental Health Awareness Month. That's what we're in. I mean, this becomes a real issue just personally. When gas is $6.99 a gallon on the south side of Chicago, I mean, when people can't refinance their homes, your home falls into disrepair, and then you can lose your home because you can't refinance it. You can't refinance it at these interest rates. When we hear talk of the Fed and we hear Treasury Secretary Yellen, who said that she thought that, inflation wasn't going to be almost like a permanent condition, sadly. It seems for many people who are really struggling. I mean, what do you say to people? I mean, why should we care about the Fed? How does the Treasury Secretary impact how we live? And what can we do about this mess that we're in? I mean, this is unsustainable, Dr. Wolf. The cost of everything is just too high.
Secretary Yellen was at the Fed for a long time prior to over to the Treasury, so she's held both. I think to be fair to the Treasury Secretary, these people make policy suggestions and try to influence markets. They don't determine outcomes, so they don't have that level of control. And also, to be fair to Dr. Yellen there, what's a little more unusual with her is that she admitted having gotten wrong. Unfortunately for us economists, having gotten wrong is par for the course. That just means Thursday. What's a little bit unusual is that she came out and talked about it. So I don't want to ding her the way some people have for being more honest about the limitations of the science than maybe some of her colleagues. That seems like a kind of poor form on my part. But look, clearly the thought was that we could move through this inflation more quickly, and I think there were 2 big mistakes there. One, everyone made, and just sort of why you stay humble in this business, which is I don't think people were thinking that we would have the war or that it would be so intense or so long-lasting or so seemingly without end as it is now between Russia and the Ukraine. And so that's probably not particularly the fault of any particular policymaker in one organization or not. That this sort of was hard to understand or hard to foresee unless you were basically Putin. That would probably be something you didn't know. So that's probably more understandable. The other thing is that I think we're beginning, begrudgingly, a few people to get our heads around the post-COVID world, which again isn't here yet, is not the pre-COVID world after COVID. It's a different world, and people are going to have different expectations. And you see bosses, whether it's yesterday Elon Musk was saying, "Hey, if you don't come back to work every day, I'm going to assume you've resigned," while publicly he's taken on a second and third CEO role simultaneously to be the highest paid person. At very least, that might be a little tone deaf. And at least 2 of his 3 CEO jobs won't see him at work any given day because he's got 2 other jobs. And so when he doesn't see you in the office, if you work for him, he's assumed you've resigned. When you don't see him in the office, you assume he's a crazy genius. But there are some who might see that as more than one standard. I don't know who. I'm not one of them. I'm too busy arming America's unborn children for their cultural life. But there are other people down in the muck who are worried about that stuff. And so, look, I think there might be a disconnect here between the assumptions and the idea that people are going to go back to their old job. And I think we saw this. I think we talked about this on your air, and we had a prescient guest appearance from Jonathan Jackson then on that subject as well. There was this thought that the reason people weren't going back to work and things weren't kind of resetting was because people got assistance. Now, partly that's insane because we were also still in the middle of a pandemic that hasn't ended, but we'll back part of that. People weren't going back to work because they weren't willing to die to be disrespected for less money than it costs to have a life with dignity. That's not going to go back in the tube that easy. So it is an opportunity to solve a real social problem that very much predates COVID, right? So I'm not trying to say this is just the cause of COVID. Clearly it's not. But sometimes something gets laid bare, right? And the best analogy I have is sometimes something comes out in a difficult conversation with someone you're close to, and you can't unsay that, and the other person can't unhear that. And the sooner you get about acknowledging that that's been said and that's the reality, the sooner you move forward. And the more time you pretend that you didn't say it or they didn't hear it, the less time you have to solve your problem, right? So these problems were not caused by COVID. They were aggravated
obliterated and revealed by COVID. And pretending that didn't happen isn't going to work, I don't think.
Wow. There's that. Let me go to some of the callers. Let me go to Noel, because people have been holding, waiting. Noel, what's on your mind, sweetie?
Good morning, Miss Jackson. How you doing?
It's always a joy to hear your voice.
Okay. This question is from Mr. Jackson. I live in the First District. I went to your office yesterday, 8658 South Cottage. Early voting started on May 26th in Chicago, and for everybody else it's on June 13th. If you go to Congress, what do you intend to do about these gas prices? Because we are subsidizing the war in Ukraine, but we cannot suspend the gas tax. Well, thank you very much. The first thing we have to do on these gas prices, the federal Mr. Biden had used the strategic reserve to open up additional gas. That's one. I think in the short term, I'd be a proponent of increasing U.S. production. We do have quite amount of natural reserves here in the United States. I do not want to extend the production, if you will, of new territories of leased lands. I don't think that's necessary. But the gas companies, look at their profits. It's not being fairly distributed. When ExxonMobil ended up with record quarterly profits, that's not because of the gas that in the prices in Ukraine. That gas takes 45 days to get over here, and they were pushing the price up in the same day. Look at the price of chicken. Look at the price of gas. People are using this opportunity under the guise of inflation to stick it to the American consumer. I would ask that those at the Federal Trade Commission to open up the antitrust investigations so that we can lower these prices immediately. There's no oversight at the moment.
Well, $7 for gas on the south side of Chicago, unsustainable. And that's unsustainable, Dr. Wolf. I mean, people can't. What, Jonathan?
Look at those profiting. They have these record prices and record profits. That's not because the cost of their goods have increased exponentially. They're just raising the prices randomly.
I mean, Dr. Wolf, what do you have to say about that? I mean, because it just seems like the only people who are comfortable are the corporations. And they're producing products in the oil industry that's destroying the environment. No accountability. Dr. Wolf.
No, clearly the environmental impacts of burning fossil fuels have been known for quite some time, and I'm pretty furious. That's probably little to do with today's prices, to be honest, other than there may be a feature to which people thinking about a future with more electric vehicles and less carbon fuel, which we kind of need to survive as a species, does dissuade some investment, right, in all kinds of things. And this industry has been very artful and very good and very well protected at taking advantage of disruptions in supply markets. Most of the gas that anyone's buying right now is bought in a forward contract from these oil companies. It was probably arranged years ago, and they're probably still paying $30 a barrel. So they're not paying today's prices. Now they could sell that oil to someone else and get today's prices, so there is a rationale. But clearly we could ask to get through this unusually difficult moment where we're being asked to be patriotic and support Ukraine. We could also ask some of our oil companies and energy companies to be part of that patriotic effort in the form of not making windfall profits right now. Sounds like that's a suggestion that Congressman Jackson has. It's a reasonable one. We have done it, by the way, at some points in American history, so it's not without precedent. The other thing is the bigger picture is what I mean about the opportunity and the suffering, and this is long term. It doesn't solve today's problems, and I'm not trying to turn a deaf ear to them, but having private citizens who can't move around because we have inadequate or non-existent public transit, and so they're dependent on cars they can't afford very easily in the best of times, gas they can't afford, nor can the environment in the best of times. We might begin, again, the longer process of reconsidering that, because it doesn't equalize people, it isn't sustainable environmentally, and it blows a huge hole in people's budgets even when it isn't $6 or $7 per gallon of gas.
Mm. So what's the solution? I mean, where do we go from here? Dr. Wolf?
Well, I think you first these things on the table, and second, you decide what you subsidize. So the other opportunity around this recession is we spent a lot of money propping up the status quo before COVID for a general public that is increasingly disenchanted or outright enraged about that status quo. So we're paying public tax money to keep in place a series of systems, corporations, and rules and regulations that the public is violently reacting against. So I think it might be time to reconsider what we're paying to keep and what we're not paying for. And moving around folks with public transit, the other one that I think is glaring that has to come back is we just went through a pandemic where the world saw the lesson of the value of a public health infrastructure. If we still don't have one, we're not even talking about it.
Dr. Max Wolf, everybody. Dr. Max Wolf. Jonathan Jackson, I have about a minute and a half before we go. Is there anything you want to, is there any closing remark that you would like to make, having just heard the brilliant Dr. Wolf?
I'd like to take it back to gun violence. That as these children are laid to rest in Texas, as mass shootings just took place in a hospital on a second floor. I mean, you can't even be sick in the hospital without gun violence. And I'm concerned that we have normalized thoughts and prayers as opposed to policy and change and doing some action. So I'm very excited about the opportunity to represent the 1st District, to go to Congress, and to push back, fight back on this insanity that we are confronted with in this gun epidemic. We're thinking this is normal. I'd like to see people reach for the Second Commandment, not making a false God, more than the Second Amendment, the right to bear arms. It's just insane. I'd like to know that these same lawmakers that want to have bans on abortion don't want to have a ban on the AR-15 rifle. I mean, we got to be more vocal and speak out and fight back, Santita. And I'm excited about the work ahead.
Amen. Dr. Wolf, I have less than a minute. You want to say anything else before we go?
Yeah, my guess is that the gun violence also has to do with the economy and the social changes, in part because we know people want a lot of guns, which is a common response to feeling insecure, and that insecurity could come from a situation at your job, at your personal life, psychiatric makeup, whatever it is. And that if you give people one way to be in control and be powerful, and that's to terrorize a group of people with a firearm, they'll take it. And part of how you heal a society is you give people a route to be important, to be powerful, to be authoritative that doesn't involve social harm, but involves some kind of social uplift. Because a lot of these, young guys who don't see a future, let's be honest, some of them don't see much of a future for themselves because we haven't given them much of a future. They haven't built much of one for themselves. So again, maybe it's more valuable to start thinking about how to make people feel like they have something to look forward to and something to lose, not just how to penalize them more or shoot them before they can shoot you, or the things we've tended to focus on, which statistically don't work very well anyway, and also might not be the sort of best of our ideas.
Everybody gonna hear just a little bit from Dr. Wolf. I'm just going to hear just a little bit more from Dr. Wolf and Jonathan Jackson just as we get off the air. But I want to thank you all today for being with us. Thank you for being so engaged. Thank you for calling in. We're going to continue these important conversations and continue to reach out to me. Let me know on the Santita Jackson and Friends Facebook page what you want to talk about. I love you, everybody. Can't wait to be with you tomorrow, God willing. The Santita Jackson Show. Thank you, Cosby. All right.
All right. Can I put through Anita? She said she was.
Yes. Absolutely. Yes. And Jonathan, are you still there? Dr. Wolf? Okay, if you can say something to Anita before you go. Anita, what's on your mind, sweetie?
Anita, how are you doing?
I'm doing fine, Jonathan. I'm excited, but the rights of people has got to be national too. So I'm looking at you for that. I mean, they kicked my congressman out for being nonviolent. You should have used guns. Your brother should have used guns. But anyway, I want to say this. We have corporate, religious, we have gangs, we have lobbyists. All of these people use bullying tactics to make us pay for what they want. And when they can't settle things, sometimes they make us pay for their guns. And I'm against religion, corporate, gang, people wanting us to pay for their guns. And then we have to bear the blame of seeing innocent children being killed in the school system. When we're not the ones that cause all the fighting, the average citizen.
Jonathan, you have a response to Anita?
Well, I think she said quite a lot. Thank you for your excitement and your continued support of all these years, Anita. And we have to hear from many of these corporations are supposed to have some oversight. And for the last 30 years, unfortunately, they've not had any oversight. And now this is the consequence of these record high prices in gas and food and rent. And it's not a matter of supply. We have abundance. It's a matter of greed. So I look forward to raising the question so we can bring some oversight. We have the tools within the government. They've not been used.
And I tell you what, should you get to Congress, one of the things that I look forward to is you bringing someone like this brilliant economist, Dr. Max Wolf, to Congress to testify. To get him involved in committee work. It's so. Well, are you trying to run away? But Jonathan, because we don't have people like Dr. Wolf testifying and talking to the congresspersons, or am I wrong?
There's only one Dr. Max Wolf. God. There's some good news. There's some good news on the show. Economic theory and understands contemporary urban hip hop and rap. One man. I don't know about that. No, he's eclectic. My spooky word album hasn't sold that well. Jones would call him the dude. With a PhD in how to make ends meet. Yes, he is Dr. Wolf.
He's the dude.
He's the dude. I'm gonna have an intro from Mr. Jackson, and the glorious vocals of Santita as well, with a posthumous intro track, a diss track from Orange.
Oh! But you know what? See, this predates Dr. Wolf. He does not remember. I don't even know if he were born when the dude came out. This was one of the iconic Quincy Jones albums. I mean, he had the Brothers Johnson, James Ingram, Patty Austin. He had all his people on this album, all the folks. And it was the dude. And that is the highest compliment. Hey, here comes the dude. Dr. Wolf, Jonathan, we got a new nickname for him. I love it.
My album is actually called Rap Fetus and the Culture of Love.
Oh, gosh, help me. But you guys.
So I'm only dropping this in vinyl. No MP3, no nothing, just vinyl.
Oh, you pure with it. Hey, I got to bounce. Love y'all. Okay. I sent you the song. All right. Love you, Anita.
I love you. Dr. Wolf, is there anything you'd like to say? I know we kind of moved away from what we had planned to talk about today. But, I think the gun issue, I didn't realize it just cuts so deep with people. I just kept getting calls because we were talking about and next time I'll let you know just what we're talking about prior to your conversation, because sometimes people want to ask you about these questions that are kind of off topic for you, but they're not, because your genius really reaches into all areas. And one of the things that I love about you is that you think in an intersectional way. I mean, you bring all of these pieces together. You don't disconnect economics from the social, the political, the cultural. And for those of us who are religious or not, or the irreligious, you really bring it all together. $7 a gallon for premium gas on the south side of Chicago. And the south side of Chicago, to be fair, has a mix of incomes. You have some wealthy people who live on the south side. You have people who live in poverty, and everybody in between. But that's a lot, Dr. Wolf. That's a lot. People can't afford to refinance their homes, so their homes are falling into disrepair, or they can't get their kids to school, or pay these medical bills because these interest rates are too high because of inflation. Dr. Wolf, what are we going to do?
I think there's a sort of affordability crisis that gets revealed in the higher prices, for sure. I do think the gas prices will probably come down a little bit from where they are, but it'll take a while. Food prices I'm a little more worried about globally, to be honest, than the gas prices. And I think it could last longer because crop cycles are long. If you disrupt the cycle of food production and movement, it's problematic for a lot of reasons. The most obvious one is the perishability of foodstuffs. Again, similar things is pretty high, right? So oil that's stored is pretty easily retrieved, and it can be stored for a fairly long period of time, and then not necessarily enormous cost. Gas is different, but foodstuffs tend to have that perishability issue, right? So if you start to have distribution and production problems with your food, it creates social unrest very quickly because, hungry stomach is the beginning of a lot of social unrest historically, and also it takes longer to put things right. So I'm worried about that. And I don't think the government is always the solution, and I think sometimes the government's the problem. So I think that's true, and people will point that out. But we could also look at a temporary subsidy for basic food. Lots of people have done that too. So not for fancy food, but a temporary subsidy for, you think about things like eggs, milk, bread. Nothing extravagant per se, but stuff that hungry mouths need, right? Or some logistical help, but maybe that's the better way to go, which is to let the central state do some logistical stuff. Because what's happening probably in most of these cases is that things are rotting or being disposed of in Area A while they're in a shortage, which is creating price movements in Area B. So there really is a logistics piece to all this, especially with food, to the perishability. When you're talking about things like eggs and dairy and stuff like that, you can't move it to the place that's needed and wanted in a fairly timely fashion. You don't really have anything you can no longer solve a problem that you could have solved, right? So there's a real time pressure there. I think it's going to take a bit, but I think it's also going to be a bigger question here. I think we're going to have to figure out how to put people back to work, and I don't think we're being productive trying to figure out how to get everyone to do exactly what they were doing before. It looks to me a little bit like it's kind of a standoff. Right?
It is. I'm just so concerned because I think that as we're looking at, we've had more mass shootings this year than we've had in days in the year. We have more guns in the United States than we have people, and I'm like, what was on the second floor of that hospital? Was it billing? There's a lot that went through my mind with Tulsa. I was talking to Attorney Hoffler. She said, "Oh, Santita, are you looking at? If you see what's happening in Tulsa?" I'm like, honey, I've turned to HGTV because I just can't take any more of this. She said, "Yeah." So I turned on. Yes. Just let me see a renovation of before and after. Make me feel good, okay? And then I see 5 people dead in Tulsa. So immediately, one of my dearest friends is a physician at one of the big hospitals there. So I called, I'm texting her like, oh my gosh, I hope she's not there. Fortunately, she was not there. She was at another hospital across town, but her beloved was like near the hospital, like half a block away. I'm like, this is crazy because we're all like a half step away from this madness. Dr. Wolf? Max, this is crazy.
Yeah, we also bought a lot of guns. We bought a lot of guns during that downturn, and we got a lot less mentally healthy, and that's a big issue. But there is really interesting work, too, right? So there is always some dawn to the darkness here. And one of the interesting, there seems to be a very strong connection between the spree shooting and domestic violence.
Yeah.
Like more than half of the people who do these spree shootings have committed an act of domestic violence, and therefore laws pre-exist to begin the process, often not done and often slow, to remove the firearms from their hands, right? And so we see that there could be ways to move this forward that are useful on a number of different fronts. I mean, look, we did a little math together last week, I think, but we have about 600 firearms for every mental health care professional in the country. Could be that ratio could see a little bit of improvement on both sides, maybe a little less guns floating around out there, and maybe a lot more mental health care available to folks. That's part of a national health care system, right? Part of a national health care system is people who need help can get it before their circumstances are really catastrophic, and they basically can't. Mental health care is poorly and very sporadically covered and delivered here, right? And so we could do something to get rid of the sort of negative associations people unfairly have around afflictions of the mind versus the body, and we can get more people involved in trying to help on that. I think that would be pretty helpful. I think we also have these knee-jerk debates about guns that nobody thinks through. For instance, there's lots of smart, reasonable people whose idea is to get more people having guns. But if you've ever been in a situation where a large number of people are shooting at each other, I don't think you'd think that's such a good idea. Well, what's the hope, right? That one guy starts shooting, another guy blows his brains out, you just finish having your burrito? It's kind of a weird vision, right? Like, sometimes feels like maybe this wasn't all that well thought through. So you're there with your kids, and somebody starts acting up, and somebody shoots them, and somebody shoots that guy, and you're like, all right, well, that's awesome, let's get some ice cream. I mean, I think sometimes we're having these conversations where it's all emotion, no forethought, right?
Absolutely.
And so it might be more interesting to start to think about what guns mean to people, right? And to a fair number of people, with some real evidence on their side, the idea of a gun is a protection against the tyranny of the government, right? But what it really is trading the risk of the government attacking you when you don't have a firearm for the risk that someone else attacks you with that firearm. So there are circumstances in which that puts you ahead, and circumstances in which that puts you behind. I know I've said this before, it makes people angry, but individual firearms seem like they would have a limited capability to overthrow the power of the central state of the United States at this point, given some military advancement. So the very reasonable idea behind the gun, to keep away the tyranny of the government or to protect you from other people in the society, at least in part, in many places, not everywhere, not completely. There's still arguments to be made for having firearms, right? In some cases for some folks, but in a lot of places, in a lot of cases, there are solutions better than your own private firearm. In part just because, never mind the social debate, having your own private firearm often doesn't help. When you see it in every one of these cases, an increasing number of these cases, there are armed people present, and they get shot and traumatized too, because you can't move that fast, and it takes a while to figure out what's going on. And as we saw again in Texas, even trained, armed, coordinated personnel take a long time often to respond, because these things take us by surprise. Right now, I'm sure there's always a path to do better in your response to these things, but armed, everyday people are going to be slower and less precise in their reaction than trained armed professionals, and even trained armed professionals aren't fast or adequate to stop them. Right? So I don't know what test of guns make us safer we'd have to fail tomorrow to catch people's interest, but it seems like we failed every test that we've seen of late, so maybe time to broaden the conversation, and to whatever extent it's possible, maybe ground the conversation a little bit more in the stylized facts, but a little bit less in the emotion of what guns mean to different people in American history. Often reasonable, often with good argument, but just grounded a little bit more in the facts of today. Now, the irony in a show that takes interest in the history of racial issues in the United States, there was one thing America did seem to get a large swath of people interested in gun control, and that was armed African Americans. What got a lot of Americans interested in gun control at one point in history was a lot of black men with guns.
Unbelievable.
Maybe the best way to make for a more peaceful, less gun-ridden tomorrow is make sure that there's a lot of heavily armed black people.
Well,
That's just what statistically it worked before. I think it's what I think made Ronald Reagan interested in gun control at one point. So
This is. I tell you what we're doing. What we've got here is unsustainable. This is not. It's socially and it's physically unsustainable, and that is that's why we have to take this apart, because you know what. Listen, our senator, one of our U.S. senators here, during when we were bailing out Wall Street, said that he said Dick Durbin. He said, "Look, the bankers run the place, and the corporations. You know, we don't have a democracy; we have a corporatocracy. And the thing is, I don't mind corporations. I do mind anyone who takes their power and misuses it and abuses it and does not use it for the public good, for the greater good. That to me is a mistake, because if you only think of yourself, ultimately we will all lose, and that's where we are. We're losing. We're losing.
The tragedy of the common.
Yeah.
And I don't mean to be callous here, but I am an economist. It is what we study. So I don't think people understand how much America paid for this gun violence, including in cash.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously lives lost and damaged and trauma suffered should be first consideration. But right up there is we spend billions and billions of dollars trying to care for the trauma and the injury caused and incarcerating people. So we are spending billions and billions of dollars and dying in our schools and hospitals to sustain an idea about guns, freedom, and safety that almost no statistical analysis bears out. That's a very expensive myth.
Ooh. And it is costing us. I mean, and people, you know, I just have to stop and say my prayers go to the families in Buffalo. That's a story that they're trying to bury now, because I think the white supremacist aspects of it are just, that's another issue that America doesn't want to deal with.
But a trial coming that fellow, so that's not going anywhere.
You know, it's just, but my heart's with those families in Tulsa now, and in Buffalo, and in Uvalde, and just all over. There's just so much pain. The people of Yemen, the people of Ukraine, the people in Russia suffering. There are people everywhere. And I just hope that we, I heard you say some years ago, you know, grow up in our politics so that we can understand that we're all tied to one another and we all rise and fall together. It's just the facts, everybody. Them is the facts. I can't win ultimately unless you win too. Can't. And so we have to.
Great horror for being without all those people whose lives were ended.
No,
Not just this last week, but surely this last week, but
there you go.
every week.
There you go.
This violence.
I mean, someone has a cure for cancer. You know, somebody, and some child who you've aborted once they got here. Some child whose school was underfunded, who had teachers who might have cared, but they were not as well trained as the kids at the prep schools or the magnet schools, the highly selective public schools in our cities, which are really roughly on par with the top schools in the country, the top private schools. All private schools are not equal. I'm talking about the, you know, the highly selective schools in New York and Chicago and LA. You know, they get you to any school you want to go to in the world, and you're well prepared when you get there. You are. But these neighborhood schools, we've got so much genius in all of our neighborhoods, not just in the United States, but all over the world. Everything that we need to resolve every issue we've got is already here on earth. But we do not believe in developing human potential. We don't believe in protecting people. And as Dr. Wolf just said, we're all poorer for it. We're all poorer for it. There's some child out there who's got the cure to cancer, MS, Parkinson's, ALS, on and on and on. Some child who we've chosen not to educate could save all of us. Some song will not be sung because we now have charters and fewer public schools. They don't have music programs. They don't have football programs. There are people who are athletically and artistically, musically gifted. Those gifts will not be developed. That's shameful. We've taken Little League out of the inner city. That was something Lynn Coleman, the first He was the first black president of the National League and the last president of the National League. He was desperately trying to bring Little League back into the inner city. No, we've shifted it to the Caribbean and to South and Central America. Not because they have better players, but because we don't have to pay anything for them. Why do we hate Hugo Chavez? Because he said, look, if you're going to come to Venezuela, you are going to set up a fund for these players who don't make it to the major leagues. You're not just going to come here, take these young men to the United States and exploit them. I won't have it. The baseball owners hated him because of that. Come on, you all. There is enough for everybody. Everybody. More than enough. So that's my rant for the day, Dr. Wolf. It's just more than enough. More than enough. But we go through this all the time, but I can't thank you enough for all that you do, for bringing some sanity to these discussions. And I promise you, I hope Jonathan gets to Congress, not the least of which, for this reason, that we would see you testifying and talking and having you heard. No, I'm going to put that. I'm put that.
What he has to say is exciting too.
It's exciting. It's exciting. It's exciting. It's exciting. But you know, when I think of the people who I know he would bring with him, that excites me all the more. You know, that's the great thing about having this radio show.
Trade my testimony style a little bit for Congress.
No, that's no. You know. Look, one thing I know about you, you're gonna say it. You're gonna say it, but you're gonna say it in a way it's gonna be heard. But I'm excited. I'm excited.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a resource story in all this too, right? And I think it's probably, again, not the most important, and there's still a lot of uncertainty around it. But it looks like this young man here in Texas somehow found almost no resources to invest in a job or a life or a degree or sort of feeling good about the future, but does seem to have raised a sizable amount of money to buy weapons and ammunition and clips and pretty advanced systems, right? So the most technologically advanced and well-funded aspects of his life were these sort of weapons of destruction. Kind of sad testimony to where a not trivial number of people are at, right?
Oh, absolutely. You know, we will fund weapons of destruction, but we will not put money into human construction. It's crazy. It's crazy.
You're a young man who's left school and no longer working and working in a fast food restaurant where the wages probably weren't enormously high. To put together the resources for all those weapons, that's a lot of ingenuity, a lot of planning, possibly some help. I mean, it's interesting what we find resources for and what we don't.
It is interesting. For war, not for peace. For products, not for people. We're going to pay for this, everybody. We are paying for it. People feel undervalued. That's why they don't mind taking your life, because it's nothing to take. You said that about them. It's not right, everybody. And that's why we raise these questions for you every day, so that once you leave this show, I want you to keep the conversation going. Please do. Start elevating the conversation. We talk about things that are too trivial and that mean too little when matters mean too much to us. So let's start elevating these conversations and have some real conversations over coffee, at the water cooler, if you will. Start having some real conversations, and let's move this needle so that we can do well. I love you, everybody. Dr. Wolf, you know I love you. You're just a jewel. What a blessing you've been in my life.
Yeah. Hope I haven't dragged down your ratings.
Oh, no, I love my Dr. Wolf. But no, I mean, and people love you. That's why, you know, they had different questions for you today. But I think that, like I said, the gun conversation, you know, it bent it, you know, in another direction, because you're just hearing about yet another mass shooting.
Yeah, people do feel that urgency if they feel like their pieces and, you know, their life or their peace is in peril. Makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, look, Dr. Wolf, you can't even go to the hospital now. What? Somebody's opening fire not on the main floor. I mean, that would have been horrible. But this guy got in the elevator or got on the escalator and went upstairs and started killing.
I think we need to ask some hard questions, though. Perhaps it was the way they were dressed in the hospital.
Oh, okay. You know what? That lets you know just how crazy my sense of humor is. This is, I talk to Dr. Wolf like several times a day. These are things that he makes me laugh so I can get through my day.
Everything you sure she was going to accomplish in her life that hasn't quite yet is probably because of those conversations.
Oh, we have fun though. But wait. Oh.
I don't joking better, so I joke around not to be offensive or take lightly things that are intrinsically the heaviest concepts, but just to sort of pull through the difficulty. It's one coping mechanism. Mm-hmm. Not the only, maybe not the best, but certainly I don't mean any offense when I act flippant on some topics that are mortal and super important and deep and full of real heartfelt emotion.
But that's how people cope. I mean, I think that, when you and I both come from traditions where people have been treated horribly. And I think it's our humor and our seeing light in dark places that has gotten our people through. And
There be joking around and then bitter, right? Those are your choices. Bitterness is usually the least easy to recover from, and humor is at least relatively more easy to recover from. Hopefully for the people around you too, if your jokes aren't terrible. At least for you. And then hopefully for others too. On the assumption that some of what you think is funny, others do too. Which on a good day, I think is the case. But who knows? But yeah, I mean, look, it's hard not to already be obsessed for this shooting that we'll learn about tomorrow, the day after. This weekend seems to be particularly perilous of late.
Mm-hmm. I mean, and when you are locking people in when they can't drive their cars, and more people have left their jobs, I mean, come on, Oh.
Yeah, a lot of into the pot.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes. Well, I know we've discussed this before, but having lived so much of my life in New York City, and you ride the subways here and stuff. New York kind of seeds. You can feel when you're a little bit closer to the edge, a little bit further from the edge. And it's one of those things you learn to feel because New York's never that far from the edge. Mm-hmm. So pay attention, and you can feel it, especially on these real hot days on those trains.
Mm-hmm. Oh boy.
People are weary and stressed, and small altercations have become bigger than they needed to be or should have been so many times now that our crime blotters are starting to look like they did in the 90s.
Oh, well, look, let me tell you, I will be in New York soon. And I, my friend, will not be on that subway. Even though, I know the subway well. Where I need to go in New York, I can get there on the subway. Not I, my friend. Not this time. I will walk or take an Uber. I'll even walk across the Brooklyn Bridge. Huh?
I do that all the time. I walk across the Brooklyn Bridge. The problem is New York City needs people on those subways.
Oh, yeah.
Subways are the arteries of the city. And a lot of people feel the same way you do, right? And for some people, I think it might be more about being worried about confined spaces and COVID and such. Mm-hmm. And for a lot of people, it's crime, right? And every time we have one of these sort of major crime events, especially that gets a lot of attention, it does, dissuades riderships, and it makes it harder for New York City to recover. I understand people's decisions. I mean, I'm not going to say I haven't taken the ferry more and walked more, or sometimes taken a cab, although I don't do it so often. But yeah, sometimes, because I'm nervous about it. But
whenever I get onto these trains, I'm not nervous about it because I really feel that when it's my time, it's my time. But it's just when you feel the tension when you go into these places, it doesn't make you feel good, Max. I mean, you just
no, it's true. Always police with no mask on, or some guy with no pants reciting the words to a song with this, which is not illegal to say.
But look, when when Aunt Santita takes your daughter to tea, we won't be going that way. How about that?
No, my brother likes it that way. Yeah,
I will say, oh, Auntie's got palpitations today, baby. We're not we're not going to do that, and she should, because I would never encourage her to be fearful. I wouldn't do that. I would never do that. Like, okay.
She loves to marry the most. She can look out the window, but to her, yeah, as a kid, especially before COVID, although most of her life now, so sadly been under COVID or half of it. You encourage a kid to take the subway because feeling comfortable on the subway is kind of a thing you need if you're not rich and you're going to live in New York.
Yeah, and I would never encourage her to be fearful. I would always say, okay, but we would walk.
As a little kid, have these horrible moments with your kid. And first you look over, you realize she has her tongue against that pole. Like, oh wow! Oh my God!
Oh
no
Lord!
idea what it was like, but I mean, they do have really interesting little kids. At least that will tell.
Oh yeah, I can't do it.
It's a funny thing as a New York parent too, because my daughter will come and talk to a homeless person. If they don't look crazy, you want to encourage her to, because you don't want her to see them as less. But on the other hand, you also don't want her to get stabbed in the chest with a screwdriver.
Oh.
So it is one of these things that negotiating some of our social failings can become pretty real in the New York subway system pretty fast. Or in the neighborhood above ground too. But yeah.
Absolutely.
Because I don't want her to someone being poor with someone being dangerous. Because I think there's a lot of social support for that.
Absolutely. That's why, this whole discussion about people who are mentally ill committing these crimes is, number one, it's not true. And, this escalates violence against mentally ill people or people who are struggling. They just set a man on fire here who's homeless.
Yeah, it's always like, you think I'm substantially mentally ill? But yeah, not all of them. Sure.
It's terrible. So, well, you know what? I'm going to...
Who are really have their challenges, right?
Yeah.
I don't think
it's not in our interest, because at some given point in your life you will be considered mentally ill if you're depressed, whatever it is. So just let's get to the real issue here, which they don't want to deal with. No one's taking a camera to the gun manufacturers, the gun sellers. Nobody's looking at them. Nobody's looking at how they're marketing to angry young men, angry young white men in particular. No one's talking about how this is being tied to toxic masculinity for all men of all colors. It's crazy. It's crazy.
No, hard to celebrate the same traits that could lead to a crime spree most of the time, and then condemn someone for them another time. That subtlety is lost on some folks, and so you're pretty close to the line. Kind of stuff you're encouraging, and that can be confusing to people. A lot of things could be done better, and this might sound very lame. But I do think it's important to see how hard life is, how much stress people are under, and how many of them get through the day in a respectful, dignified way. It's hard to pay attention to that with a great headline and meet Tom, who didn't freak out today, although today's fact is not a great storyline. I get that. But you do have to remember, too, there are so many of our fellow citizens who are living very hard lives.
Absolutely.
Less to look forward to and more to worry about. And they still treat themselves right, and they treat the people around them right, and they hold the door for a stranger, or they stand up for a pregnant lady on the subway. And that is a story that gets very little attention, and that does happen millions of times a week in the city, and in every other city. You do want to, however lame it sounds, you do want to remember that too, to keep yourself from losing balance.
Absolutely. You want to remember that first. Because there's still a lot of great things happening in the world. And I don't want us to be pessimistic. I want us to be optimistic, if you will. And dare I say, keep hope alive. Don't sink into despair. These are all things that are under our control. Certainly we can change. We can change ourselves and change the world. Before you change the world, you must change yourself. And so if we want peace, we must be peace. If we want love, we've got to be love and loving. Think about that, everybody. Dr. Wolf, you want to say anything before we go?
No, agreed.
Well,
Agreed. I can't improve on that. So see you all next week, and thank you.
oh, I just love you, but I might call you before next Thursday. There's so much going on, Dr. Wolf. So much. Oh, so much. Send you much love.
Talk to you soon.
Absolutely. Bye-bye. I love you, everybody. Cannot wait to be not dismayed. Whatever betide, God will take care of you. And that is so true. God will take care of you. D-Ray, thank you, girl. Thank you all for all your support, wherever you are. And like and share this show. Like and share, like and subscribe on YouTube. But like and share, like and share, like and share, like and share. Love you, everybody. I'll see you tomorrow, God willing.